Su Qi instantly devised a strategy upon seeing the soul graveyard. The god of anxiety seemed to underestimate him, as the soul graveyard's strength wasn't high. This was because a large number of souls originally did not have high spiritual strength, but the accumulated despair was profound, and the impact of resentment was also extremely astonishing. Moreover, silence of all things itself exerts a strong suppression on beings with a lower soul level than its own, with exceptional silence effects. However, Su Qi did not believe that the soul graveyard was the true killing blow. Its fatal aspect should not be there. The god of anxiety wouldn't do something so foolish. He paused slightly and looked at his arm. Blood Rage Curse seemed even more dark red than before. Is this the real objective? At this moment, a violent and surging sound of waves reverberated throughout the soul graveyard. A large amount of seawater akin to the underworld's Huangquan surged from all directions. The seawater surged with might, instantly covering numerous tombstones. Indeed, it's not that simple. In front of him, a bizarre scene unfolded. The Sea of Unease was like the underworld's Huangquan, with waves surging and countless twisted souls floating on the surface, their faces distorted and expression grim, emitting low moans of despair in their struggle. These souls seemed to be bound by invisible chains, always at risk of being swallowed by the abyss. At the same time, Su, not free. A low and indistinct hoarse voice echoed in Su Qi's ears, carrying a frigidness that tore at his mind, as if dragging him into the endless abyss. This time he saw a terrifying figure emerged above this sea. It was the true form of the god of anxiety, but obviously only a projection, still without any power. Its voice relied on no spiritual energy, purely sound waves, each word infused with the terror of the god. Just a few words uttered softly. I've, finally, seen you, already stirred up waves of disturbance. This was different from before. It was the true form of the god of anxiety, complete will, complete form, even different from the one in the anxious land. After all, in the anxious land, what was sealed was only a portion of the god of anxiety's core body. Su Qi was calm and stroked his chin. I'm considering whether to hold a fan signing event. The projection of the god of anxiety flickered like strobe lights, without any unnecessary words, directly spitting out a single word. After all, its true form was now also restricted by a large number of ominous chains, and now to descend prematurely, aiming to capture itself. As the pigeon god said, it paid a great price and was restricted. It seems even the god couldn't surpass the ominousness of the old days. Really unnecessary. Heard that descending prematurely from the depths of the old days requires a great price. For a mere sequence 7 like myself, truly, good brother, not worth it. Su Qi assured that he spoke the truth. If the god of anxiety descended following the normal procedure, not only would there be no price to pay, no restrictions, but the terrifying strength would be completely different from now, easily resolving everything. However, the god of anxiety chose to act this way nonetheless. Was it out of hatred for him? It didn't seem to be, to Su Qi, after all, being the god, even though constantly voicing the desire to tear him to pieces, the god wouldn't be so impulsive in his grand view. Therefore, Su Qi had another speculation, and the god of anxiety was even more eager than imagined, wanting his life. At this moment, boom, 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 accompanied by a suffocating aura, he felt countless strange, uneasy creatures emerging from the sea, as if the Sea of Unease had pronounced a death sentence on him. These monsters varied in shape, twisted and distorted, embodiments of nightmare. Their bodies were composed of black shadows, eyes filled with fierce light. Various claws and fangs rushed towards Su Qi, emitting horrifying screams, seemingly roaring to tear his soul apart. So that's it. Su Qi looked at the curses glowing on his body, densely covering his arm. The previous soul graveyard was just the first step, the resentment of souls directly locked onto me. As long as the resentment clinging to me remains, I'll be trapped in this sea of unease, killed by countless monsters. At this moment, the projection of the god of anxiety faded away after appearing for just a moment. But various terrifying, uneasy monsters were constantly attacking, a mighty wave pursuing Su Qi. This place was a section of the middle segment connecting the Sea of Unease and the new continent through this special mask point. Su Qi smirked. His face showed no fear. He extended his hand, spiritual energy quickly gathering at his fingertips, forming a glowing beam. With a soft command, numerous rays of light pierced towards the attacking monsters like swords. The beams sliced through the air, like stars breaking the darkness, instantly shredding numerous monsters into pieces. Ah! As souls separated from the bodies of the monsters, they emitted angry and desperate roars. But then these souls dived back into the Sea of Unease, reborn into monsters emerging from the Sea of Unease to engulf Su Qi. Moreover, this sea was a blood-red expanse, containing the strength of the blood demon. It seemed that the entity had divine power assisting, allowing such rapid body formation. I see. They can revive countless times. Su Qi saw this scene, and instead, a glint shone in his eyes. He was uncertain before, but now he was determined to obtain this place. Because the aspect of soul preservation alone was already powerful, and now with the blood demon's strength, even if the physical body dies, as long as the soul exists, one can be resurrected infinitely. It's like a miniature version of paradise. Su Qi then made another move. As his spiritual energy danced, the magic cube domain erupted, and a multitude of lethal forces prepared in the magic cube domain flew like meteors, swiftly and accurately flashing and retreating as they shattered the monsters one by one, like a violent storm. However, these attacks seemed to only tear through the surface, and these monsters would never be exhausted unless countless souls could be truly relieved. What a bother! Su Qi muttered under his breath. At this moment, Su Qi sensed a fluctuation in the surrounding space, and from the depths of the Sea of Unease emerged another colossal figure. It was a giant ghost, cloaked in black with a blurred face, seemingly the ruler of the soul graveyard. Its presence made the surrounding air heavy, oppressing the entire battlefield instantly. What you desire, is it this darkness? The ghost whispered, a voice like a murmur from hell, echoing in Su Qi's ear with an irresistible majesty. Su Qi squinted. It seems there is not only the power of the blood demon but also the power of the god of chaos. The cloak of chaos around this figure was entirely black liquid, and though Su Qi had never seen the god of chaos, the information above its head still displayed the word chaos. Even though it was just a puppet, it clearly held the power of the Lord of Chaos. I'm starting to feel something is amiss. The Abyss four-pillar gods seem to be exchanging power, as if converging some powerful force. But now is not the time to think. Whoosh! The chaotic puppet wasn't directly charging at Su Qi. Instead, all its chaotic liquid surged in every direction, turning the entire sea black. And similarly, a large amount of chaos merged into the bodies of the monsters. The blood demon's limitless flesh, the limitless revival of the soul graveyard, and the infinite devouring of chaotic liquid. This is the true terrifying force of the abyss. Even thinking about it feels despairing. Boom! The sea surface beneath Su Qi's feet suddenly exploded with intense black light, swallowing towards him. Spiritual energy continuously gathered around him, and his body turned into a shadow in an instant, directly dodging this black liquid's encasement. The ghost puppet seemed to sense Su Qi's unusualness at this moment. Although lacking will, it was still a projection of the god of chaos's power. The ghost's form moved slowly, swinging its arms, causing the surrounding monsters to let out angry roars that stirred waves upon waves, swarming towards Su Qi, as if to drown him in this endless darkness. Su Qi remained calm and composed, the light beneath his feet growing ever more brilliant, and with a gentle snap of his fingers, a powerful beam erupted forth, shooting straight to the heavens. He was now utilizing the power of the character card, but not those golden and purple rare character cards. Rather, it was white and blue, and Su Qi merely extracted the power within to barely survive here. After all, here was already lethal at every step, and the only solution was to find the god of anxiety's mask and destroy it. Moreover, Su Qi truly knew where it was now, right in the deepest corner of this sea, like the god of anxiety was digging a pit for him step by step. He naturally did the same, setting down a large number of starfire chips along the way. After all, the projection of the god of anxiety had only appeared for a few breaths. Now, apart from the endless death traps here, it was Su Chi's paradise. Additionally, Su Chi was also frantically absorbing all the energy erupting around him through a blue mark. It must be said, the energy output here each and every second was equivalent to at least 10,000 adventurers' battle output in the outside world. Oh! And in the outside world, the entire Hustler Palace, although besieged by a large number of the Abyss Monster Tide, still stood firm. Besides the palace's strong resistance against the massive invasion, there was also the Pigeon God. The reason Su Chi summoned it was that, although it didn't want to admit it, the angelic bloodline in its body would not disappear. This part of the power it didn't want to use was crucial. Su Chi, you bastard. You plotted against me. The Pigeon God cursed as it looked at the other half of the feather in the palace, now neatly sitting at the center of the divine summoning ceremony. Besides summoning me, you bastard even summoned the angel divine race. The key is, the angel divine race was unaware that someone was impersonating an angel divine son in the divine summon, especially since it's in this place. Angelic blood cannot be faked. So, at this moment, the projection of the divine race had power cascading over this palace, protecting it. That guy deceived the angel divine race, creating enemies for himself. Wait a minute. The Pigeon God. Ever since he obtained the Angel series, he's been viewed as an enemy by the angel divine race. After all, the angel divine race values its noble bloodline the most, comparable in terror and hierarchy to the Abyss. But the Pigeon God looked up at the projection appearing in the sea of old days, light shining down from it. Although I haven't paid attention to the angel divine race for a long time, after all, it was kicked out like trash long ago when it was just Sequence 7, and joining the superpower dimension and the God's Palace came much later. But does the angel divine race's temple group have to be this terrifying? It raised its head with a heavy gaze. Among the outer god forces of chaos, the angel divine race is a top divine race. And even though the infinite divine star and the heavenly court exist, they rank over 20 places behind the angel divine race. But now, the Pigeon God's eyes were heavy. In the end, still chose the Abyss? Yes, that's right, from the temple group projection it saw the black aura of the Abyss, black fallen angels, swimming within it. And at this very moment, the main battlefield between the God's Palace and the Abyss, here, had already shattered one continent after another, and within each space fragment floating in deep space, various intense battles erupted. Old Yellow was among them, leading the members of the Hustlers sect, engaging in battle along the edges. Stability is the principle of our Hustlers sect. No need to take risks. Staying on the periphery is enough. Run if you can. Your strength is not enough to reach the core, so each of you should focus on teamwork here. Aim at the weakest and kill them. Priest, what you say makes sense. But everyone sighed. These monsters are very weak. Apart from being able to quickly heal, they pose almost no threat. So every time we are about to kill them all, and then let them escape to recover and fight again, isn't that a bit too stable? Old Yellow cursed. You little ones know nothing. This is strategy. By continuously maintaining the battle atmosphere, there won't be any difficult and troublesome issues that come up, and no one would notice they're slacking off. Moreover, the situation has continuously worsened. Not mentioning the fallen god of anxiety's mask just now, the numerous projections appearing in the sea of old days are already fully tainted with the Abyss's terrifying aura. Old Yellow, his mind heavy. Although saying this, he had led 300 members of the Hustlers sect to fight peacefully so far without any losses. It's entirely because he clearly sees the current situation. They are enough at the edge. The core doesn't need their strength, and going there is a death sentence. That's already a battle between gods, a collision between top forces and divine races, each with an incredibly frightening reputation. The erupting power made it seem like they were about to punch through this deep space. Old Yellow watched all of this. Su Buxian, that guy, talked beautifully before, but he's been telling them this many times now. He doesn't understand at all what's really happening in front of him. The divine projections of hundreds of thousands of gods and millions of demigods are currently reflected in the sea of old days, locked in constant battle below. Old Huang silently watched everything. However, it wasn't a big issue. The emperor is far above, and here at the boundary, it is very comfortable. Honored priest. At this moment, Nancy appeared beside him and couldn't help but say, "Are we slacking off too much? This war concerns everyone. Though standing here is already unattainable for many, but," he sighed softly. Nancy still hoped that everyone would give their all to secure a future here. "I know what you're thinking," Old Huang calmly replied. "But things are not that simple." He looked toward the space fragments. On the surface, it seems like a confrontation between the God's Palace and the Abyss, but in reality, the God's Palace and the Abyss are similar. Aside from the core temple group, there are too many top forces and divine races gathered here. Nancy was taken aback. He knew this to some extent but hadn't delved into it. As for what the yellow-robed priest meant, in essence, it's all about interest-driven conflicts between those who chose or were forced to choose their alliances. Let's not even talk about the Abyss. The God's Palace also has such elements. If you look closely, Old Huang slowly continued, you'll find that in many battlefields of divine warfare, there is organizational formation. Aside from that core group in the God's Palace, the rest are cooperative alliances, not that simple. Nancy felt his heart sink slightly. He roughly understood what the yellow-robed priest implied. For our hustlers sect, it's already enough to secure 300 spots. But to go further, it still depends on everything behind the scenes. Without the protection of the divine race, charging into that battlefield leaves no retreat. Regardless of casualties, there will be no support, and I bet that in less than an hour, it would be torn apart with over half dead or wounded. Nancy murmured, "So that's how it is." In this battlefield, they were an extremely small organization that inserted themselves into a list of millions. Securing 300 spots was already a feat, but, unlike other forces, the Heavenly Destiny people, other forces have their own gods and organizational protection. The Heavenly Destiny people are under the God's Palace's jurisdiction, and even if weak, are still protected by the God's Palace. And the Hustlers is the only one that entered here through business cooperation. "Do you think I stopped you?" Old Huang said calmly. Moreover, Su Buxian mentioned business and cooperation multiple times. "Do you really think he was just being arrogant? He extracted himself from the God's Palace to prevent you from becoming cannon fodder for other forces." Nancy was silent. He finally understood. Su Buxian was thinking that far ahead, and the priest before him had seen through everything? "I understand Su Buxian's intentions. So now we—" "No." Old Huang shook his head. "You don't understand. Or rather, I don't understand either." Nancy was stunned. Old Huang subtly tugged at his lips. "Because Su Buxian hasn't shown up yet. Let's wait. I don't know what surprise or shock he'll bring, but being familiar with him, he always strikes where you least expect." Nancy agreed, but he looked at the vast battle before him. However, given the current situation, he felt that any surprise was unrelated to this place. Boom, boom, boom. At this moment, more than a dozen immense divine projections from the God's Palace and Abyss were rumbling into sight from the sea of old days. Old Huang's eyes narrowed. They've appeared. This is the strongest divine rank power below the God, the Divine Kings. Although their numbers were not much compared to before, each figure's appearance stirred great waves in the sea of old days. Although the Abyss Seven Pillars God hasn't appeared yet, among those joining their alliance are over 100 divine kings. The God's Palace has gathered 120 divine kings, and there were also divine kings of chaos descending, yet they did not head to the battlefield below, as it was not their domain. These outer gods' divine kings merely watched with cold eyes. The place where they descended formed a vast projection, seemingly covering the descending space fragments. It has begun. Old Huang looked at each one with a solemn expression. This is what I meant. At the behest of personal interests, they were seizing battlefield advantages, while the surrounding deep space film seemed to be shattering, as if thousands of troops were about to march in. At this moment, the main battlefield seemed to have calmed a bit, countless people gasping for breath, retracting their icy blades, temporarily retreating to a place of sanctuary. On this main battlefield, the divine projections stood like towering mountains, unmoving but exuding unmatched majesty and oppression. On the abyss side, their forms were shrouded in the aura of darkness, resembling nightmares from the abyss, enveloping the world in fear and oppression. Each projection was like a high-hanging star, tranquil yet mercilessly observing the battle below, adding weight to the chaotic situation. Why does it feel? Bai Yilan and the others' faces showed trembling unease, their complexion pale. The body seems uncontrollably trembling. They all lowered their heads, taking deep gulps of air, as if just a glance more would explode. The divine kings of the gods' palace and abyss, each representing different beliefs and powers, stood off against each other. The air filled with a tense atmosphere of impending conflict. The indifference between the divine kings, even without a word spoken, was like an invisible blade slicing through the battlefield. The Abyss God King, shrouded in a black cloak, with his face hidden in shadows, only revealing a pair of eyes blazing like flames, gives an omnipresent sense of terror. Their existence is not only a symbol of strength but also an embodiment of fear, as each God King is enveloped in black fog. Old Huang said in a deep voice, "Because there is no sanctuary for us, no miracles descending, such an array, the soul suppression that is unseeable will directly come upon us. If you get close enough, you can only rely on the so-called character cards or other ancient powers to stand firm, but that is all. So, do you understand why I've always placed the Hustlers sect on the edge?" Everyone from the Hustlers sect fell silent. But don't lose heart. Just consider it a glimpse of the world. True strong men will not get discouraged because of this, but be unwilling. Old Huang felt he had truly gotten to the bottom of this priest position. Su Buxian ought to thank him for steadily leading everyone to this point. But that guy is actually quite at ease acting as a hands-off manager. At this moment, the voice of the God King is already resonating. You who once considered yourselves gods of the world, in the end, still could not choose to be controlled by the abyss. A God King from the God's palace spoke with a deep and magnetic voice, seemingly able to penetrate time and space, reaching the ears of the Abyss God King group. Even dignity is disregarded. A God King from the Abyss side curved a peaceful smile. All beliefs, all present world powers are nothing but castles in the sky. Unless within one's own hand, it is all empty talk. The God Kings of the God's palace looked coldly on, seemingly unfazed by the words of the Abyss God King. Yet, the opposing forces had already begun to collide. An elder God King clasped his hands together, murmuring softly, "The power of light shall, like the myriad rays of dawn, dispel your shadows. The darkness of the abyss will ultimately fail to cover the brilliance of this land." The elder God King's words, though brief, were like holy light spreading universally, intertwining in the air, bursting forth with a reassuring power. The space he protected belonged to his tribe, within the Forces people. They were soothed by the holy light. Each person's injury was rapidly recovering, as was the consumption of spiritual energy. Not only him, other God Kings let out a light hum, also raised their hands, starting to descend power at this moment. Although they still borrowed the most suitable bodies, the original owners of the bodies were completely offline, be it the bodies or various spiritual energies. Auras were entirely in the form of God Kings. This is also the terror of the God Kings, miracles as if the person themselves were present. The Abyss God King's cold laughter was like a whisper of the night, infiltrating every corner, making people shudder. Under their protection, each one's forces surged like tides into those fragments of space. Abyss believers, clad in black, with eyes flashing with fervor and bloodthirsty desires, seemed already ready to charge into the battlefield. Their powers were like beasts in the darkness, ready to be unleashed any time, sweeping everything away. Whereas the followers of the god's palace presented another scene, clad in golden armor, wielding weapons of light, with firm expressions, eyes burning with the fire of holy faith. Despite facing the threat of the abyss, they always maintained a high fighting spirit, vowing to defend the dignity of this land. Old Huang looked at the idle persons, trembling slightly amidst their confrontation, seemingly unable to withstand the terrifying pressure. He sighed softly. With a lift of his hand, he wielded power, making everyone feel a little better. In the end, I've become the one protecting them, Su Buxian, that guy. Where on earth is he? If this continues, regardless if these young fellas agree or not, I'm taking them out of here. After all, the current situation has completely exceeded the hustler's sect's capacity to withstand. In this place, without background and strength, merely relying on empty promises and surprise tactics truly doesn't work. Besides, also over there, Old Huang looked towards the distance. The terrifying pressure of this battlefield became increasingly apparent, and the space membrane surrounding the extremely evil world twisted continuously due to the tremors of the world tree, presenting many fissures, seemingly tearing apart the balance of the entire world. Within the fissures, countless life forms could be faintly seen, seemingly like thousands of troops poised and ready, preparing to break free from constraints and rush to the battlefield. Look! The forces outside have begun to accumulate. Old Huang sighed and said, the stage established by this mighty impact, getting here is enough. I feel the sect leader won't agree with this point. And speaking was another group that joined the hustler's sect later. Old Huang looked over. Although they were abnormalities, they were especially fervent and loyal towards Su Buxian, and their powers were also very strange. You all truly have confidence in Su Buxian. However, Old Huang shook his head. That guy now is below on the battlefield. He might not know how things have turned up here. With the escalation of this confrontation, the atmosphere of the battlefield became ever more grave, so much so that the entire space trembled for the conflict that was about to erupt. The struggle between god kings, like a secret storm, surging from beneath, would surely trigger a world-shaking war. And within this endless heaviness and oppression, what awaited them was a whirlwind-like destructive war, ultimately would collide at this moment, bursting forth with an irreversible conclusion. But most importantly is the world tree. Now it is completely different from before, having fully inherited the power of the old world tree. Now it traverses the entire sea of old days. The major branches spread out like Star River, with numerous fruits budding, containing astonishing origin power. Seems the world tree is about to bloom. The limits of this extremely evil world shall also be broken. The abyss demon god king whispered, revealing a hint of coldness in his tone, looking towards countless life forms outside the deep space. Those creatures ignorant of death are destined to become sacrifices for our conquest of the present world. Boom! At this moment, the world tree emitted a booming roar. The entire new continent erupted into dramatic tremors. Its enormous canopy stretched out like a boundless galaxy, extending to the horizon, the massive trunk resembling the immortal pillar of the universe, firmly supporting everything. Among the tree's leaves, those fruits about to bloom were faintly visible, shimmering with peculiar rays, akin to the most brilliant stars in the cosmos. And at that moment, the fruits finally broke open. Dazzling light spilled out instantly, like millions of beams simultaneously blooming, illuminating the entire battlefield. These light balls, akin to countless radiant planets, pierced through the dark sky, unleashing unimaginable power. They, in an instant, transformed into scattered stars across the new continent, bringing with them unparalleled origin power. Where they went, it was as sweeping as reversing heaven and earth. Even the sea of old days was directly suppressed, even visible, a part of black and white directly turned into color. That is origin power, the terrifying power that can restore erased traces. And with the scattering of the light balls, the origin particles in the air like countless flying elves, vast and boundless, akin to a grand fireworks show in deep space. Each particle glimmered with strange brilliance, carrying endless energy across the air. That power, seemingly able to tear through all barriers. This is merely the power of the origin release. More crucial was the space membrane limiting the extremely evil world. At this moment, it's already beginning to distort, as if unable to bear the influence of this power, producing slight fluctuations. Then, followed by a deafening roar, the membrane finally crumbled, as if an invisible barrier was completely torn apart. At this moment, it was as if being in an ant nest. The fierce slaughter broke open the outer layer of Earth, exposing the outside world. Only to find such ant nests densely packed, seemingly countless. They've arrived. Old Huang summoned the members of the Hustlers sect. At this moment, the rift in the membrane resembled the maw of a giant beast, revealing endless darkness and chaos. And behind this rift, numerous twists emerged. Next came the spaces of countless worlds, carrying with them an endless army of life, their shadows flickering as they appeared here. This multitude, like 1,000 armies, overwhelming, isn't it? Old Huang spoke slowly. Unfortunately, not one of them belongs to the Hustlers sect. Worlds from all sides had long been prepared and surged toward this battlefield like a tide. These worlds were the strengths of various forces in the present world, abundant with high-sequence extraordinary beings, finally stepping into this extremely evil world. Swarming in were also numerous believers from the Abyss, the backbone forces of various top factions, each world showcasing the huge forms of eerie abnormalities, pollution monsters, appearing so menacing and powerful among them. And the Abyss believers, like beasts in the darkness, were fervent and eager, longing for the impending revelry. Finally, the true slaughter can begin. Their eyes flickered with strange flames, seemingly drawn by the allure of the origin power, restless, and impatiently yearning to charge toward this land and sweep everything away. On the other side, besides the inheritors of various godly powers, many beings in the God's Palace sensed this impending impact. Kill! Chaos is far more interesting than merely watching. Without any hesitation, the Divine Kings had already started to act. This battle was destined to be earth-shattering. The Abyss and the God's Palace would interweave and collide in this already chaotic place, as if intending to tear the whole world apart. With the space twisting and collapsing, besides these beings like Divine Kings, gods, others also clashed and started fighting. And the corner Old Huang chose turned out to be the place with the least impact. Nancy watched this scene, the numerous worlds already in fierce collision with the core area. He had to admit, the foresight of the yellow-robed priest was impressive. The outskirts were indeed the safest place. If they were in the central area now, they might have already been embroiled in intense impacts with no sanctuary or retreat. After all, it was just them, the Hustlers here, without any affiliated power or sanctuary. Moreover, Nancy looked towards the sky dome on this piece of space fragments. Because less origin is falling here? At this moment, the erupting origin hovered like a small sun above the core area's different spaces, its light dazzling and blazing, illuminating the surrounding chaotic environment, as if declaring supreme power and existence. The brilliant radiance reflected through layers of space fragments, casting a myriad of colors, mirroring this extremely evil world on the brink of falling into terror and chaos. While above their heads, there was only a minimal glimmer of origin brilliance. It seems it hasn't fallen yet, Nancy murmured. Old Huang calmly watched this scene. The origin. They are like micro-stars now constantly evolving. Then, like the eventual fate of various stars, they'll collapse and explode. At that time, it'll be akin to the universe's most dazzling fireworks. Old Huang spoke quite romantically, but actually broader in scope. For indeed each fruit of the world tree equates to an unformed microcosm, these origins resembling the essence within an embryo. Furthermore, it will, like that singularity, generate gravity. At this moment, in the center of the origin, the rotating light core continuously emitted energy, like a burning star, radiating dizzying intense brilliance. The surrounding worlds from outside, attracted by severe distortion, were drawn in. After all, each world was an independent yet colliding space fragment. The fine edges of space twisted like glass. Under the strong gravity of the origin, these space fragments were constantly undergoing wondrous transformations, and when forces from other worlds collided with them, they would instantly resonate and merge with each other. "You see," Old Huang softly said, "these origins are akin to a weakened version of a singularity, their gravity splicing together other worlds entering here." Under the sheen of the origin, the surrounding spaces melded, as though engaging in a silent dance. Each collision, each reformation brimming with countless variables, unpredictable trajectories, but under the massive gravitational force of the core region's origin, most of those worlds were directly directed, converging towards the light of the origin. At this moment, even here worlds were also being spliced together. Boom, boom, boom. Though already in an edge place, and even with just a bit of origin above them, it still attracted two worlds, merging from the tumbling chaos. "That's the flag of the abyss." Nancy's expression grew slightly solemn, looking towards one of the worlds, instantly discerning the totem of countless people in that world. The dark power of the abyss was approaching, fervent believers ravenous like hungry wolves, yearning for the revelry about to unfold. "No rush, our luck is not bad either." Old Huang glanced towards the other side's world, where the holy light shone resplendently. "That's the world of the Light Society, the direct force of the God's Palace." The truly significant force from the God's Palace naturally outmatched any alliances joined for benefits or based on factional considerations. In summary, at this moment, whether it is the Abyss world or other worlds fighting for survival, interests, etc., all under the influence of the origin, feel an irresistible attraction. The intersection of spaces is becoming increasingly intense, and the brilliance of various explosive collisions of distortions is dazzlingly radiant in deep space. And an equally magnificent battle is about to begin. The leaders of both the Light Society and the Abyss, two small worlds, are extraordinary beings, while the forces below are at least at sequence 6. The two worlds have not yet integrated stably, and some spaces are still twisting. "Kill!" Indifferent roars have already arisen, with no superfluous words. This is a war prepared long ago, and the leaders of both the Light Society and the Abyss naturally see the part of the monster tide in this space, as well as the 300 members of the Hustlers sect within it. That group, are they from other forces? There is no God's Palace mark. The mark of the God's Palace is naturally the aura that has been baptized by the temple. They are also taking action, preparing to fight the Abyss, so let's bring them along and fight the Abyss before us together. The countless armies of the Light Society have already charged in, with terrifying spiritual energy explosively unleashed. The Light Society's ranks are orderly, members hold sacred weapons, their expressions firm, clad in radiant armor, as if injecting the will of light into every inch of land. The burst of spiritual energy is like a storm, impacting the air with a deafening roar. And behind the army of the Light Society, flags fly high, flapping in the wind, representing their faith and hope, symbolizing the supreme God of light and justice. For the future. With a command from the leader, the power of light swept out like thunder, launching a charge toward the dark world of the Abyss. The strangeness of the Abyss also frantically surged out of the darkness, roaring fiercely like a thirsty beast, their bodies twisted by evil energy, faces hideous, terrifying, demonic screams intertwining with shouts of light, as if two extreme forces clashed at this moment, tearing space and rippling out waves. Not just here. In the core region, countless forces worlds and various abyss pollutions, blood-red worlds, merge, with numerous lives battling explosively amidst sparks, spiritual energy and evil energy drawing stunning trajectories in the air. Every clash is thunderous as lightning. Meanwhile, amidst this chaotic and shocking interworld battle, the 300 members of the Hustlers sect are like a group fighting in a back alley amidst a massive starship battle. Yet, even if they are weak and small in power, Bai Yilan leads the Meteor Squad, fighting shoulder to shoulder with Frost, Snakehead Man, and others. Everyone is wearing everyday commerce combat equipment provided by Nancy, maneuvering flexibly between the battlefield, quickly and precisely killing surrounding monsters. Finally able to unleash full force, Frost swings the long sword in his hand, each swing leaving an impressive icy arc. Bai Yilan's gaze is calm, constantly watching the surroundings, avoiding encirclement, as various bizarre and pollution monsters on the Abyss side are extremely numerous and troublesome. The members of the Meteor Squad quickly keep pace, their cooperation so seamless it resembles a sharp blade, stabbing into gaps and weak points. On the other side, the unique team of Snakehead Man, Croc Brother, and Spider-Man is also fiercely combating. They move flexibly, traversing the battlefield, using their powerful physiques to counter the attacks of Abyss monsters, their strong bodies and fierce assaults breaking through large waves of monsters. They are indeed stronger than imagined. The power of their bloodline is not simple. Lao Huang observes this. Where did Su Buxian find them? He can feel that their bloodline is very strong, with amazing potential and developability. Lao Huang, as a priest of the Hustlers sect, stands on high ground, gazing sharply over the entire battlefield. Commanding is as important as fighting, and the use of strategy will change the course of the battle, especially with the use of the Starfire chip. The information flow of the Hustlers sect is even faster and more convenient than spiritual energy communication. Meteor Squad, maneuver to the left. Don't get encircled by those bizarre things. Their pollution is like a plague. Avoid contact. Frost, you attract firepower, create opportunities for them, and the mutant team, you should launch a surprise attack. Those Abyss monsters, you seem able to easily suppress them. Lao Huang's voice is calm yet carries an awe-inspiring majesty, directly transmitted through the Starfire chip to each squad's captain, allowing the members of the Hustlers sect to quickly adjust their tactics. Under his command, the battle grows increasingly orderly. Of course, this is limited to this small area, as the main strength remains with the Light Society. The small size of the Hustlers sect cannot possibly reverse the situation of the entire battlefield. However, the erupting battle is instead extremely ferocious, almost breaking through one of the strange armies of the Abyss. And at this moment, this naturally attracts the attention of the Abyss extraordinary beings. No scent of the Light Society, but they seem to be a group of somewhat powerful ants. It coldly draws out a bone knife, with terrifying power concentrated within. Must be eliminated. Whoosh! Endless killing intent transforms into a kilometer-tall bone wheel, emerging with a chilling wind to attack. Lao Huang sighs. As expected, we've been targeted, but can only handle it myself. He waves his hand, spiritual energy forming a giant yellow cross, tracing an arc in the air with destructive momentum, instantly tearing it apart. The powerful force makes surrounding enemies retreat, not daring to approach. This causes the extraordinary being's eyes to narrow, showing a bit of wariness. There is a strong one, but perhaps it's only extraordinary power. It immediately kicks away the extraordinary being attacking itself and abruptly turns to attack Lao Huang directly. Lao Huang expected this. The Abyss is like this, frenzied and bloodthirsty, loves slaughter. Once they sense a troublesome power, they charge in viciously without any reasoning. However, knowing this, Lao Huang did not unleash his full strength, knowing there's no need to reveal his demigod identity. Just like this, hiding strength to protect these little ones of the Hustlers sect on this edge is enough. The core area doesn't even need to be considered, as the protection strength there is at least god level, not just gods but also a large, exclusive force. Rumble. The battle across the extremely evil world grows more intense, the fusion of light and darkness seemingly intensifying without end. Keep charging, never retreat. The Light Society remains a group of mighty and righteous people. No origin can fall into the hands of the Abyss. Their voices ring out, inspiring their teammates, morale high. The weapons in their hands unleash astonishing spiritual energy, each strike carrying steadfast conviction. No matter how strong the Abyss, they will confront it in the name of light, defending the future. Nancy watches this scene. He understands this is the reason Lao Huang mentioned luck. The Light Society belongs exclusively to the forces of the God's Palace, with very firm goals and faith, with no worry of being used as cannon fodder. Instead, in this edge world, the combat situation is gradually becoming clear. Because not only did the Light Society unexpectedly arrive at the edge, but also with Lao Huang commanding the participation of the Hustlers sect in the battle. Instead, they suppress the enemies of this abyss area. Just, Lao Huang looks toward the core area, the true storm center, where various gods clash. The Divine King's explosive force, the terrifying aura, and power are incredibly astonishing, stirring the Star River. And over there, it's not optimistic, even somewhat breaking apart. The intersection of light and dark flickering. The situation not looking good. Though regrettable, it has nothing to do with him. Having neither the ability nor qualification to participate, he's already planning his retreat. And suspects Su Buxian, who has been out of contact for so long, may have run away already. Where has that bastard gone? Old Huang was even thinking about how to escape. At least after the Origin's eruption, could he seize some origin? And at the moment when the four god masters of the abyss descended and the god's palace retreated, it would be the time for their early withdrawal. Those who run fast will survive, but those who run slow will have no choice but to die under the destruction of the abyss. And at this moment, a signal suddenly flickered, appearing in his Starfire chip. The long-lost words brought messages. Hey, hey, hey! It seems there's finally a signal, calling Vulture. Respond if you hear me. As soon as these words appeared, although there was no name or voice, Old Huang's stunned face instantly turned red. Su Buxian, damn you! Where the hell have you been? Who else could it be but Su Buxian? Moreover, if Su Buxian were here, he'd really want to beat this guy for naming him Vulture. Ah, it's good to have a response, thanks to the World Trees Bloom, breaking the limitations. I thought you guys were disconnecting for an escape. The other party's message was leisurely, and what appeared was no longer a message but a faintly laughing voice. And Old Huang's eyes widened. This bastard. I hadn't even mentioned that this guy wanted to disconnect for an escape. And he turns it around. And at this moment, boom! The enormous high-frequency fluctuations and high-energy rays erupted from the core battlefield of deep space, shaking the heavens. Sounds like things are going poorly over there. What do you mean by poorly? It's extremely bad. Old Huang cursed. Do you understand piloting drones into a Star Wars scene? That's exactly the situation now. That doesn't sound too bad, Su Chi said with a faint smile. Small targets, less conspicuous. You, Old Huang sighed. All right, there's some time. How's the situation on your side? Su Chi slightly reined in his tone. There was just a violent upheaval. Many worlds were shattered, probably the battle of the Divine Kings, with space fragments shooting like meteors. Old Huang, I think even on the edges it's probably dangerous. Multiple worlds can either merge together or be shattered, the shattered space fragments being scattered and pulled by the Origin's gravity. Such a battlefield is incredibly complex. Even the edges will be swept into the vortex's center. Not to mention the presence of the Sea of Old Days looming overhead. That terrifying aura grows increasingly mighty. All right, got it. Su Chi's voice came through. So where are you? What are you going to do next? Don't go silent on me again. Still on the battlefield below. Just finished handling a small matter. Now resting and having tea in the palace. Old Huang's veins popped. Resting, having tea. He was about to blow up but narrowed his eyes slightly. Palace? Is it the palace on the battlefield below? Who did you join? If that were the case, it could be acceptable, at least a place of sanctuary. Now that the war between the God's Palace and the Abyss is terrifying beyond measure, their 300 Hustlers sect members are like ants on a leaf, enduring the overwhelming waves on the fringes. To say that, if joining, wouldn't I directly join the God's Palace? Su Chi lightly said, All right, I have some matters going offline for now. Offline my ass. Old Huang's eyes widened. Speak quickly, what to do next? How long till you come? Or else I'll take everyone and leave directly. Simple, just need to do one thing, and that's to stay alive. Wait for me half an hour. Old Huang slightly paused. Half an hour? He suddenly looked up at the Sea of Old Days. This time was just about the same as the time he felt the final arrival of the Sea of Old Days power. That guy wouldn't also. Su Qi ended the call over there. However, although the current disturbance didn't diminish at all, instead continuing to escalate, in half an hour, it should be no big problem. Old Huang looked towards the battlefield. In the core area of deep space, the confrontation between light and darkness was like an endless catastrophe. Chaos and order converged here, forming an incomparably shocking battle scene. Above the sky, the divine kings of the gods' palace and the abyss demon god kings fiercely clashed within infinite rifts. As if the heavens and earth changed color, all creation trembled. Boom! A startling thunderous noise, as if the entire land of extreme evil crumbled before this force. The shockwaves of battle swept like a raging storm, the world's fragments scattered under this force's influence. Each collision accompanied by a shrill roar, space being torn apart, time seemingly coming to a halt. Kill them! The divine kings of the gods' palace gave a command, and the holy brilliance instantly burst forth on them, forming one radiant shield after another, resisting the abyss's incursion. However, the power of the abyss demon god kings poured forth like an endless abyss. At this moment, they still weren't using their full strength, but it was overwhelming. This level of divine king already surpassed the limits of physical bodies. The force wielded was essentially the power of the Sea of Old Days projection descending. Shatter! The towering abyss demon god king said coldly, his voice dripping with endless mockery, his eyes flashing with deep and dark lights, as if to devour everything. He raised his hand. The surrounding space instantly twisted, dark power surged like tides, morphing into countless black tentacles, lunging at the divine kings of the gods' palace. The divine kings of the gods' palace jointly unleashed dazzling light, flickering like stars in the darkness, their divinity continuously erupting, yet the dark power seemed unwilling to grant them any respite. Boom! 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 The earth-shaking rumble was unending, and waves of energy swept in like tides. In an instant, fragments of space were torn apart and scattered everywhere. Some of those fragments were corroded by darkness, turning into cursed matter, while others flashed with dazzling brilliance under the power of light, reflecting the fierceness of battle. In the midst of this endless chaos, Old Huang stood on the periphery, watching everything, his expression grave. There's trouble. Not because the god's palace was being suppressed, but because the strength displayed by both god kings exceeded his predictions. This was truly troublesome. It showed that the power they had resurrected was more than imagined. The limitations of their bodies were weakened, and the divine status of the god kings was pulling on the power still buried in the Sea of Old Days. Otherwise, the battle wouldn't have been so terrifying. It's unimaginable what the scene would be like if this battle continued to spread and ultimately the Godmaster descended. His gaze swept towards the sky from time to time, where world fragments fell like meteors, filling his heart with unease. No way! Old Huang's heart suddenly quivered. Has it already arrived? In the Sea of Old Days there were many figures. Though they seemed far away and hard to detect, these traces were enough to catch the keen attention of many. Everyone felt a chill. This was completely different from when the god of anxiety revealed a mere shadow. It was a true terrifying descent. The waves stirred by the Sea of Old Days were vast and boundless, incredibly astonishing. At this moment, watch out! Everyone be careful! Old Huang's eyes narrowed. Use spiritual energy to protect yourselves. Withdraw from the battle. And just as the words fell, it was as if a cold gale swept through, but this was different. It seemed to blow over the countless beings present. A figure from the abyss emerged from the Sea of Old Days. Lord of Blood Demon. Old Huang's eyes were grave, filled with dread. At the moment its figure appeared, the surrounding Sea of Old Days took on a color, like overwhelming waves of blood, as if endless blood spread within, dyeing everything around. And in the next moment, the god kings suddenly stiffened, for that blood-red brilliance, like a storm, carried despair and madness, sweeping towards them. "Good opportunity!" A voice of an abyss god king croaked, its eyes filled with endless indifference. The power of the Lord of Blood Demon wanted to seize this moment to launch a fierce assault, tearing through the defenses of the gods. However, the gods' palace was not completely lax. By this moment, they were infinitely close to the final stage. Just as the blood-red domain expanded, a god master clad in glorious armor suddenly manifested in the sea of old days. Though it was merely a figure, merely a rift in the surging sea of old days, yet it radiated dazzling light, like a sun illuminating the entire battlefield. Powerful strength surged within, as if time itself stopped in that instant, and a massive amount of the blood demon's power was blocked here. The whole space was on the verge of collapse. This was a terrifying clash of power between the god masters. Old Huang felt his scalp tingle watching this scene. Damn, had the true horror begun to ignore all limits and make a move? Who was this god master from the god's palace? The master of the present world. The god master's figure erupted with thunder, shocking the mind of everyone present. Accompanied by the explosion of his power, brilliance gathered around him, forming an invisible barrier, rushing towards the blood-red domain. The god master's figure was resolute and towering, like a majestic star river standing amidst the darkness. At this moment in the sea of old days, the Lord of Blood Demon's power surged like a tide, violently colliding with the god master's brilliance. With a boom, the space twisted under the impact of this power. As if all the surrounding air trembled, red waves and dazzling light intertwined, forming a heart-stirring scene. However, while the clash above continued, a breach was torn among the god kings. An entity from the abyss grasped that slight opportunity, using a terrifying cold blade to pierce a god king's body. The astounding power shattered the battlefield where it stood. That god king spurted blood wildly, and the brilliance flickering on its body gradually dimmed, a sign of reduced strength. It seems the first god king to be slain is about to be born. The abyss god king's cold laugh echoed through the battlefield, the blood-red domain like the omen of death, corroding the minds of everyone in the god's palace. Here, slaying referred to the slaying of the current strength and will of a deity. Even if death was evaded, severe damage to the body was inevitable. The abyss god king did not hesitate, continuing its assault. Under the influence of the two god masters' powers, the battle's brutality reached its peak in this moment. The standoff between light and darkness was like an endless cataclysm. All things trembled in its wake. Countless beings struggled in despair, tossed in the maelstrom of battle, like leaves in the wind, ready to be swallowed at any moment. "This is so damn," Old Huang cursed angrily. He hadn't anticipated the god master would make a move. This was truly troublesome now. The battle on the god king's side became unbalanced. The formidable power turned even more frenzied. The area they were in was no longer safe. The surrounding space like torn fabric, incomplete and fragile. This half-hour estimation seems to have gone wrong. Boom! At that moment, the terrifying aftermath erupted with a sky-shaking roar. A massive world fragment, like a meteor streaking across the sky, flew towards Old Huang, and on that fragment's battlefield lay the god king who had just been caught and suppressed. And at this moment, this god king's eyes were heavy, full of grievous injuries, clearly having just undergone a fierce battle with blood spilled. Now it was adjusting its breath along with the shattered battlefield fragment. And evidently, the abyss god king wasn't about to give it this chance. It suddenly burst from the deep space, chasing after this high-speed fragment, approaching rapidly. Damn! Old Huang's heart sank immediately, as this fragment was unstoppably heading towards them. Dum dum dum. Damn! Can't you guys not come this way? Bastards! Boom! 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 Even in the high-speed descent, the sides were still fighting, colliding. The figure of that god king appeared increasingly pale on the fragment, with a heavy expression, seemingly unable to break free. The outcome of this war is already determined. No matter how you struggle, it cannot be changed. The Abyss Demon God King's voice rang out, its gaze calm and cruel, deep and terrifying. And this is truly an eagerly awaited moment. The Abyss Demon God King curled its lips into a cold smile, its gaze taking in the surrounding battle, as if not only focusing on the God King, but also encompassing the battles of other deities. Just like before, there will still be no change. You shall all die. In that instant, the Abyss Demon God King's power erupted, causing the surrounding space to shake violently, making the entire area tremble in response. Dark power spewed from its body, forming an endless vortex, consuming everything around. Too close. The faces of those still fighting in the Light Society changed, immediately summoning the power of protection from above, enveloping everyone. "Hold it off together," they shouted in unison. Even just the aftermath, the Abyss power swept in like a storm, instantly engulfing their light, the surrounding space cracking open under the influence of this power. Old Huang's face turned pale without any hesitation. He instantly unleashed his strength, shielding the members of the Hustlers sect. Whether it was divinity, temples, world tree points, or other such protective powers, they all could be aids. But relying on those points from the Hustlers sect members, it simply wasn't enough to block it. He had to act personally. Moreover, Old Huang's eyes gravely watched the battle between the two God Kings, approaching closer to this place. This was truly a big problem. The battle fluctuations between the two divine kings are incredibly astonishing. The aftermath has already swept over. It is the power transmission from their sea of old days descending, illuminating this land, far more than just a projection. The divine king of the God's Palace is struck so hard that his divine power shatters, constantly being blasted towards this side by the power of the Abyss God King. It seems as though he is about to crash straight into the small world where Old Huang and the others reside without deviation. Old Huang watched this scene, his eyes almost popping out in anger. Your mother's kiss. What rotten luck, to be so unfortunate. Originally thought they were rushing in their direction, but unexpectedly, directly crashing into their world. Everyone, quickly, get out of the way. The leader of the Light Society's eyes sharpened as he immediately commanded his troops nearby. However, the surrounding space had already been distorted, and escape was hopeless. The aftermath of the battle at this moment poured down like a flood, suffocating them to the point where they could barely breathe. Boom! A loud noise seemed to shake the entire world. At this moment, the divine king of the God's Palace was directly blasted into the small world by the power of the Abyss God King, like a meteor streaking across the night sky, instantly tearing through the tranquility of space. A strong shockwave spread outward from the point of impact, making the air seem to be torn apart, and time appeared to be halted by this force. Damn it! Old Huang cursed. The entire small world trembled violently. This wasn't the kind of minor shaking but a violent tremor that threatened to fling everything away. A 1,000-meter-deep massive crater formed the instant the divine king hit the ground, and the land around was uprooted by the powerful shockwave, with countless earth and stones flying like a small rain of soil and rocks, carrying unimaginable destructive power. This small world instantly cracked with fine fissures. Aftermath spread outward like a giant wave, affecting both the Light Society and Abyss who were in the midst of battle. At that moment, the soldiers and monsters who were originally engaged in fierce combat were suddenly swept away by this unexpected power, swaying like dry leaves in the wind. Countless weaker members were flung, colliding with distant buildings and the ground, producing dull thuds and intertwining with painful groans. Everyone fall back. Without any hesitation, Old Huang sheltered everyone as they retreated. Whether the people of the Light Society or the bizarre followers of the Abyss, their gazes involuntarily focused on the deep pit below, because the next wave of attack had already arrived. The Abyss God King descended with a thunderous impact, his eyes cold to the extreme, drawing terrifying power from the sky-domed sea of old days. Boom, boom, boom! The terrifying black light erupted once more, and the divine king's figure directly darted out from the pit. Even heavily injured, he never gave up and was struggling to face the pursuing Abyss God King. Around the crater, Black fog swirled as if devouring all light and life, suffocating. The black fog directly unfolded a whole domain, enveloping the figure of the divine king from the god's palace. Countless personnel immediately retreated. The people of the Light Society watched the black fog domain with heavy expressions. They couldn't assist, but whether it was them or old Huang, who was now at the rear, they all desperately hoped that the divine king of the god's palace could win this battle. The figure of the divine king from the god's palace flickered, showing an unyielding stance even at the brink of exhaustion, with divine power surging around him, trying to fend off the invasion from the dark abyss. But his divinity was visibly dimming, as if being devoured by invisible black fog, with every strike like battling an endless abyss. Yet the opponent's power continuously surged in like a tide, overwhelmingly suppressing him. At the same time, it wasn't just him. Another figure also flickered within the black fog, like a nightmare existence, with every attack carrying the power to destroy everything, like the roar of the abyss, shaking the heart of everyone. Even the elites of the Light Society felt an unprecedented fear, understanding that they were as insignificant as ants in the face of such power, which was only utilizing the power of projection. Not far away, old Huang watched all this, his expression becoming incredibly solemn. Trouble, big trouble. The situation was far more complex than he imagined. Don't think it's just a battle between two divine kings, but in reality, their projection reflects here, continuously transmitting power, already exceeding the limits of this small world. Next, the spatial fissures of this small world would grow more numerous, followed by its shattering. They couldn't even decide where they could go, possibly being thrown into chaos or possibly into the core region. This is the most deadly. The members of the Hustlers sect, under the influence of the aftermath, were also affected, looking solemnly at everything in front of them. They couldn't help but question themselves. Is this kind of battle really something we can participate in? In truth, everyone could see by now that the situation was mixed with all sorts of forces swirling around. Nothing was as simple as it seemed. And just as the battle between the Divine King and the Abyss God King intensified, the leader of the Light Society closely observed the battle from the sidelines, naturally hoping the Divine King could hold on. However, his expression was also extremely heavy, ready for mutual destruction. Yes, mutual destruction. Although most joined factions based on interests, there were also those with genuine beliefs, serving as the last line of defense for the God's Palace, coming with a faith in sacrifice no matter what. As time went by, the God King's divinity in the God's Palace grew weaker, and the strength he resisted with began to falter. The black mist continuously expanded around him, as if searching for his weakness, while the Abyss God King seized the opportunity to launch an even fiercer attack. The immense black mist burst forth with a thunderous roar. In that moment, it was as if he had become the abyss that devours all. Every defense by the God King became increasingly strained. Even the divinity, old Huang's eyes darkened. Going to lose. Finally, in a violent collision, the God King was struck by the Abyss God King's strength. His body was fiercely lifted and slammed heavily onto the ground. The ground let out a muffled boom, and the depth of the crater seemed to deepen continuously, while he struggled to hold on, surrounded by the black mist. However, the black mist was like an endless abyss, gradually consuming his will. The God King's figure grew fainter in the darkness, as if about to be completely engulfed by it. Boom, boom, boom. With a deafening crash, a surge of black mist shot skyward, unleashing a fierce anomaly throughout the small world. The scene of the God King's fall, caused by the ignited divinity, weighed heavily on everyone's minds. Yet the black fog domain suddenly shifted. It had been retracted. As for the battle inside, the aftermath continued to rage on, but the aura of battle grew weaker. Finally, the black fog domain dispersed altogether. The Abyss Demon God King held the God King of the God's Palace, who was battered and bruised, tightly in his grasp like a cage of black mist. Yet, the latter also fully contracted, using all his power solely for defense, not yet completely breached. He panted slightly, seemingly greatly exhausted, yet a shadowy cold smile hung on his face. Not bad at all, still resisting. It's really hard to kill. But the more you struggle, the more it excites me. Moreover, during this time, the Abyss God King's icy gaze swept over the people of this small world. Let's first wipe out these small fry. The black mist on him erupted suddenly. Block it! The leader of the Light Society roared, unleashing all the ancient powers prepared, enveloping everyone in the protective glow. Of course, those without the Light Society's totem, the members of the Hustlers sect, were not included in this coverage. Old Huang cursed under his breath, using his own power to offer protection. Must find a good position, at least easy to escape. He had already seen that the space here was collapsing, and this small world might burst apart at any moment. At least stay farther from the Abyss God King. Find a safer place. But the Light Society advanced directly. The power of the Extraordinaries was also impressive. Although not comparable to the God King's projected power, combined they could still put up a fight. However, the Abyss side also had such existences, and various extraordinary believers charged in with cold smiles. Don't worry, the Abyss Demon God King said lightly, his voice like endless darkness, echoing across this fragmented world. You will all die, annihilated with no one spared, masses of blood and flesh shattering. When the true gods descend, this will be the best welcome. And also, I seem to have discovered something interesting. His gaze, like a keen blade, pierced towards Old Huang's direction. Old Huang's heart tightened. The Abyss Demon God King's gaze made him feel an indescribable shiver of fear, a terrifying oppression from the abyss, as if it would swallow him whole. Damn it! He seemed to have been discovered. The opponent was no ordinary deity. Even the Demon Lord would bow down before him. He was the true Demon God King, second to none. Because he had to protect the people of the Hustlers sect, he had to use power, and under the opponent's gaze it was indeed impossible to conceal the traces. Indeed, this was one of the reasons Old Huang feared the abyss so much. Once entangled with the abyss, its traces clung like a bone worm, endlessly accumulating, impossible to shake off. No matter the passage of time, no matter the disguise, as long as power was used in the opponent's presence, their totem would detect these traces, and they even had a black ancient text, able to instantly find out what this person did, what part of the abyss was destroyed, what people were killed from the abyss. All the crimes would appear on it. And now, this was the situation, the most troublesome situation. Old Huang felt an overwhelming sense of unease, because in front of the Abyss God King, a black ancient book had appeared, its pages flipping rapidly. He had done many things in the abyss, but had never directly faced any powerful existence there, always resorted to stealth and deception, yet despite being cautious, traces had always been left behind. Didn't expect. Seems there's another interesting fellow here. The Abyss God King spoke with a cold sneer. Without any hesitation, Old Huang erupted with all his strength. Everyone in the Hustlers sect, follow me. He had to leave now. At this moment, the small world was already collapsing, its scattered fragments rapidly separating around. Noticing this, Old Huang immediately prepared to escape. Even though it was merely the power of an extraordinary, the life level of a demigod was still intact, and the power he unleashed directly broke free from the black fog's restraints. However, trying to leave? Better stay here, the Abyss Demon God King said coldly, its voice like a death sentence, sending a chill down Old Huang's spine. Its black fog condensed instantly, as if to completely envelop the entire small world, devouring all struggling life within. At this moment, a strong sense of crisis surged within Old Huang. Time seemed to freeze in this instant. He knew that if he didn't go all out, he and the members of the Hustler sect would all be killed by the Abyss God King. Damn it! If it weren't for this damn luck, he could surely withstand it for half an hour. But now, everyone, don't just stand there. Unleash all the sanctuary power behind me. Old Huang roared. Understood. Old Huang stopped hiding and unleashed all his restored power. Over the past year, his strength had recovered rapidly, and before entering the land of extreme evil, he had already stepped into the extraordinary, and along the way various ancient powers emerged, unlocking restrictions, and he gradually reached a higher sequence. But in this domain, he was still somewhat suppressed. However, the sanctuary power prepared by everyone could be fully utilized. In that instant, at least they broke through the black fog's bondage. His gaze penetrated through the dense layers of black fog, seeing the Abyss God King's figure coming at him like a nightmare. Even the divine king of the god's palace had already been taken along casually, and they were already heavily injured, firmly imprisoned by the black fog. A complete defeat was just a matter of time. Damn it! The God King's power did not burst from its body directly, but from a projection connected to the Sea of Old Days, ignoring space, ignoring transmission time, and descended directly. Boom! At this moment, the defenses that Old Huang established shook violently, turning into fragments and scattering under the terrifying power of the Abyss God King. And in the next moment, a terrifying energy surged towards him. Old Huang's heartbeat accelerated suddenly, his body feeling an unprecedented sense of oppression. The Abyss God King's power was immensely strong. The sharp spikes of the black fog stabbed at him like blades, causing intense pain all over his body, blood gushing out wildly, even accompanied by the cracking sound of several bones. Priest! Old Huang's consciousness almost blurred instantly. The projection power of the Abyss God King was unquestionably terrifying. But at this moment, all the oppression suddenly vanished, and a fierce resolve burst forth from his heart. Did they really think I had no backup plan? Damn it all, I'll blow up with you. Just as he was about to be engulfed by the black fog, the divine artifact on Old Huang's body, the yellow robe suddenly lit up, emitting a strong, twisted yellow brilliance. At this moment, Old Huang felt a mysterious power, as if connecting him with the Sea of Old Days overhead. Uncontrollable, irresistible. Old Huang, at this moment, sensed a presence in the Sea of Old Days, awakened by his activation of the yellow robe. Seemingly awakening, and at this very moment below, Su Qi gently caressed the cracked, uneasy mask in his hand, lightly putting it on. Finally, it's time for the Hustlers sect to take the stage. At this moment, Su Qi was in the palace, concerning that so-called minor affair. It naturally referred to the mask of the god of anxiety. To be honest, the mask of the god of anxiety was truly terrifying. It was fully prepared for his arrival, prepared to kill himself, and had already arrived at the battlefield to lay out plans of destruction and cursing everything. Perhaps it thought it would have a trump card, and hence almost exhausted its killing moves. However, the god of anxiety probably never imagined. Its trump card had more than 20,000 variations. Just one purple character card directly broke the situation. Certainly, this was partly due to the weakening of the power of the god of anxiety because of various limitations, but it didn't affect the outcome. And Su Qi seemed to know what the god of anxiety was worried about. It is afraid of a certain existence. This was the information Su Qi gleaned. Very strange, afraid of a certain existence, yet filled with anger and hatred and endless killing intent. The key was that this killing intent was not directed at that existence but was entirely focused on himself. Strange indeed. The existence that the god of anxiety feared, what was it, seemed to be related to himself, and judging by the killing intent, the hatred level was exceptionally high. Su Qi did not rashly conclude, but when the god of anxiety retreated, those blood-red eyes, with terrifying bloodshot, stared directly at him. Let Su Qi know the second brother leaderboard was truly inflamed. Needs a bit more time to completely master the mask. At this moment, Su Qi was in the palace of the Hustlers sect, wearing the mask, with a vast amount of cursed power spreading across his entire body. Though various terrifying tortures were constantly ongoing, Su Qi showed no change in expression. The mask contained the power of the god of anxiety, the soul graveyard. Now controlling it was actually snatching the soul graveyard's domain. It depended on how much he could snatch. Also need time to conceal the ritual's aura. Now the ritual had already filled the entire lower battlefield range, even though many divine races' offsprings ignored the changes in the lower battlefield and directly rushed to the core battlefield, as the origin wouldn't fall, but would appear in various small worlds surrounding the singularity. However, this was not important, because the power drawn by the mask of the god of anxiety far exceeded dozens of times the battle among adventurers, directly pushing the ritual's process forward significantly, not to mention all the demons below. Though one by one they started to flee and return to the core battlefield when the mask of the god of anxiety was taken by oneself. But there were quite a few left behind, devoured by the blue mark, which absorbed much of the strength within the totem. The palaces left on the lower battlefield were only a few left. The rest chose to move to the small world where their forces were, directly transmitted upward through projection power. The adventurers remaining in the lower battlefield did not follow up, as the core battlefield was no longer something they could participate in. Those who recognized the times were wise, knowing its dangers, so they chose to stay in the lower battlefield. And the lower battlefield would see the fallen origin, though rare, usually from cracks bursting open, detached from the upper small world's gravity, and falling down. But it was also an opportunity for adventurers to safely grab some benefits. Now, including the Hustlers sect, only 3 palaces remained below, while the battlefield had instead calmed down. Boom rumble. The deep space above sent terrifying tremors. Explosive amounts of energy burst in deep space, casting a splendid Milky Way. Su Qi watched intently, though not in a hurry, as absorbing substantial energy during the ritual ascent would be very noticeable. After all, up there were gods and divine kings. He had to eliminate his aura as much as possible and delay the time of discovery. And Old Huang's explosion was anticipated, causing the traces within the Sea of Old Days to revive, equally so. Su Qi's aim was to awaken all powers that could be utilized by the Hustlers sect. This was the sanctuary behind the Hustlers sect. Of course, it would also become the center of everything. At this moment, Yang Jian and Bei Xinxing sent information. The divine race's offsprings from those 2 palaces have visited. The divine spiritual energy within their bodies had returned, their spiritual energy nearly depleted, now in a period of cooldown and recovery. After all, the lower battlefield was quite intense as well. Visit. Su Qi paused slightly. What do they want to do? They. Bei Xinxing paused. They consider us too as controllers of the Hustlers' Sex Palace, and their own divine race's situation is quite similar to ours, both isolated and unsupported, so they want to ally with us. He paused. To jointly seize the opportunity for revival. The biggest difference between divine race and divine race currently lies in how many awakening traces they possess, how many gods they can awaken. For these declining divine race, the traces just awakened were already one of the few remaining gods. The temple's projection was far less splendid than other divine race, with limited shelter strength. Of course, it's possible. Su Qi smiled slightly. It's precisely the time to need strength now. However, for the moment, do not let them know who we are fighting against, lest they flee. Yang Jian paused. This can be talked about. After all, the targets are below the divine king. Even other flourishing divine race might not produce a divine king. These entities beneath the divine king, competing with them for small world origin is inherently our goal, unlikely to cause them to flee. This is the truth. It's impossible to confront the divine king. The plan is to retreat, and then Su Qi will use the palace's gravity to guide the origin and protect the source. However, it is clear. Su Qi seemed to have forgotten something. He paused. Oh, I think I haven't told you, right? Question mark. Bei Xinxing was stunned. Told us what? Our plan is not to confront ordinary gods. Divine King, Yang Jian said solemnly. Only one of equal rank can battle on equal terms. We don't have the trump card to confront them. I advise you not to act recklessly. Bei Xinxing sighed. The Divine King is rare even among the divine race. The master behind their infinite divine star, Master of Heaven, is indeed a divine king. But his traces are completely insufficient, and they cannot awaken their divinity. So, it is necessary to rely on the strength of the origin. Once merged, it can overclock their divine bloodline. thus establishing a projection connection. Although Su Buxian had just opposed the mask of the god of anxiety, they didn't see it, after all, controlled by a projected god. They didn't know what happened at the time and afterward. They only knew that the mask and the curse seemed to have vanished. Ha! Su Qi smiled lightly. Don't worry. It's not a divine king. Good. Bei Shenxing breathed a sigh of relief. At least until they can obtain the origin, it's best not to confront a divine king. Ended the communication. Not a divine king. These 4 words should follow with, but confronting the Abyss Godmaster, right? The pigeon god stood on Su Qi's shoulder, staring at the mask on Su Qi's face. The emotion in his eyes was stifled. It should have been the first to know the truth, and the moment it learned it, it was shocked. Despite it still find it hard to believe, but it looked at the mask on Su Qi's face and finally sighed. Who would have thought you really captured the mask of the god of anxiety? Although it's just a mask, it is undoubtedly the power of the god of anxiety. It fundamentally confirms that the god of anxiety truly bears murderous intent towards Su Buxian, thus inevitably lead to a confrontation with this godmaster. Su Qi smiled without speaking. Pigeon god didn't know. There are many things to contend with, not just the god of anxiety. He checked the time, then raised his head to gaze at the sky dome. Hang in there, Old Yellow. At this moment, Old Yellow, dressed in the yellow robe, was infused with that eerie and mysterious power, and instantly felt a colossal and terrifying strength flooding into his body like a tide. The yellow robe glowed on his body, resembling a layer of flowing dark yellow airflow, tightly enveloping him. Damn it! I'm blowing you up. The opponent is a divine king. Even though he used a divine artifact, he must give it his all, especially since the opponent is from the Abyss. Old Yellow stared directly at the Abyss God King. His fear was replaced by this power, substituting in a fearless fighting spirit. Old Yellow shouted, waving his hands. The yellow robes instantly distorted the surrounding space, forming a massive vortex. The black fog was torn apart by the powerful force, erupting with astonishing energy fluctuations. The expression of the Abyss God King suddenly turned grim, feeling a completely different kind of threat than before. The twisted dark yellow emanating from Old Yellow was like aurora waves, very unusual, resisting the dark around. Moreover, the dark yellow on his body circulated, gathering a large amount of distortion in this instant, forming an invisible domain spreading outward. This is... The Abyss God King frowned, but the next moment was already covered by the domain, or rather, should be said, was confronted. The dark yellow and black fog domains took half each. The divine king he was holding was also wrapped inside. It didn't bother with these. The power of the yellow robe caused it to move, and the dark ancient books were searching. The most powerful aspect of the dark ancient books is its ability to search things from the old days, but of course it requires corresponding traces as a price. The Abyss God King didn't care, because the traces it had given were all plundered from the lives it had slaughtered. At this very moment, Old Huang's attack was like a violent storm, accompanied by lightning speed, rushing towards the Abyss God King. The power of the yellow robe made each of his swings carry the momentum to tear through space. The surrounding black mist collapsed under his offensive, shattering into fragments, as if declaring the collapse of the abyss. But in the next moment, the surrounding black mist became even denser, enveloping Old Huang like a raging tide. Your mother's kiss. Truly not that simple. Old Huang's heart trembled. He felt the endless curse and despair contained in the black mist, instantly assaulting him, causing the power within the yellow robe to surge. Light flickered across his body, and the yellow robe spewed out streams of light, rushing towards the Abyss God King, attempting to tear apart the shackles of darkness. The Abyss God King let out a cold laugh, the black mist around it rising like a monstrous wave, attacking Old Huang. Boom! In an instant, the entire small world shook violently in the confrontation between him and the Abyss God King, the air filled with the sound of tearing. Invisible shockwaves erupted in the air, tearing the surrounding space like paper. Accompanied by a deafening roar, the power of Old Huang and the Abyss God King counteracted each other. and a crack appeared in the surrounding domain, with flickering light cascading through the gap. Huff! Ha! Old Huang panted heavily. Although it appeared to be an equal match in strength, yet the opponent was calm and collected, while he was greatly consumed. After all, it's a divine artifact. Only by barely utilizing and barely erupting with it can he contend against it. The Abyss God King looked indifferently at the items on Old Huang. An extraordinary artifact indeed. Even after using the traces of millions of lives, I still haven't found anything. It seems I can only kill you first and then take it. His gaze wandered over Old Huang. The yellow robe seemed to originate from an unspeakable existence, a power it could not comprehend. Just at this moment, the long-dormant power in the depths of the Sea of Old Days was awakened. Countless darkness flowed in that nihility. The eerie, twisted eyes hidden in the deepest part of the Sea of Old Days slowly opened. Those were eyes beyond description. In this instant, Old Huang shivered but didn't pay attention, or rather he had no time to pay attention, because the Abyss God King came to kill again, not leaving him a moment to breathe. Old Huang panted heavily, the Abyss God King before him like an unsurpassable peak, with his yellow robe emitting a weak light, as if it could extinguish at any moment. The recent eruption had almost drained half of his spiritual energy. The power of the God King is not something easily contended against. At this moment, Old Huang was still struggling to hold on. Every clash with the Abyss God King felt like his soul was being ripped apart, bringing endless pain. This is the price of using the yellow robe. Whether in spirit or soul, he could feel the agony. Still gritting your teeth to hold on? Clearly there's no hope in sight. Only the path of death. Why bother? Boom! Old Huang clenched his fist, letting out a low roar. The yellow robe blossomed with dazzling light, only to be mercilessly shattered by the black mist again. His attacks looked insignificant, like sparks, appearing feeble and powerless against the boundless darkness of the Abyss God King, only able to defensively hold his ground. The Abyss God King's attacks surged like a tide. Old Huang's heart sank. His soul seemed to be on fire, just to desperately hang on. He had to admit, he had reached his limit. The terrifying black mist pursued him, left unchecked. It wouldn't take long before it pierced into his body like the captured God King and began the gradual erosion. Truly risking my life for no reason. Su Buxian, you better truly be prepared. Time seemed to be at a standstill. Or maybe it hadn't. Old Huang couldn't spare any gap to glance at the time. Facing the Abyss God King, not a moment's distraction was permissible. And at this moment, neither side noticed. Ripples had begun to surface within the domain. Old Huang, even at this moment, still hasn't given up. He believes in Su Buxian dragging half an hour's time that guy will arrive. At this moment, it seems about a minute has passed. You seem a bit distracted. The terrifying power of the Abyss God King crashes down, making Old Huang's body tremble fiercely. Even under the protection of the yellow robe, the whole person is directly pierced to the ground. He truly has no power to resist now. Old Huang's body is broken, unable to even tremble. All his strength used up. The yellow robe now no longer a protective item, but more of a dangerous backlash item. It wants to devour Old Huang. However, the Abyss God King doesn't immediately strike. Its eyes shift to glance at the distance, because there's a twisted ripple appearing in the domain, as if some power is directly invading. And in the next moment, an unspeakable blood-stained mask appears on the scene. Lord God of Anxiety. The Abyss God King actually sensed that aura in advance, and now does not seem surprised but rather a bit fanatic. As mentioned before, the difference between gods and the sequence is like this, and the God Master is truly standing at the highest point. Their downfall is the best gift to welcome your arrival. And Old Huang struggling lifts his head. Pupils shrink. It's over. That's precisely the mask of the God of Anxiety. Why has it descended here? Old Huang's mind is filled with rolling thunder. No, must escape. He still has a hidden trump card. Even Su Buxian doesn't know about this. He is the calmest, able to escape from so many pursuits. Naturally, everything would be withheld. even 4 or 5 cards. Now it's time to reveal the trump card. This move was what previously plunged his soul into a sleep, causing him to be trapped in that place and encounter Su Buxian. All sorts of twists and weirdness of that place are because of the aura emitted from Yellow Robe. And this time, Old Huang can only use it again. He and the members of the Hustlers sect need to quickly escape this small world. But this time, it is not so smooth. Want to escape? At the moment Old Huang makes a move, the Abyss God King suddenly notices. Without any hesitation, it rushes over furiously, extremely fast. Old Huang's eyes widen. Bad. However, another piercing sound with a more terrifying aura approaches even faster. The Abyss God King pauses. The God of Anxiety is interested in this too. Although it's just a mask, it undoubtedly contains the will of the God of Anxiety. It decisively reduces speed and power, assisting the leader. Do you understand what business strategy is? In the next moment, puff! A sudden sound resonates. The one trembling all over is not Old Huang, but the Abyss God King. It trembles and lowers its head, looking at the black-red blade piercing through its body. Anxiety, Lord? No. And a light chuckle sounds. It's Lord Buxian. The Abyss God King turns its head with difficulty. The original mask is now adorned on the face of an unknown person. Eyes black and white, face indistinguishable. But that hand is already holding it. What is this? His pupils shrink in horror because at this moment, the hand holding it is crazily absorbing the divine power flowing out. What is this? Even divine power can be devoured? Damn it! Why can't I move? Who are you? Why are you wearing the mask of the Lord of Anxiety? The Abyss God King can't resist. Because of the mask's power, the terrifying anxiety mask locks onto it. This temporary hosting body is strong in strength, but the soul is only a thread suppressed by the mask. Divine power is constantly being devoured. That peculiar blue mark is alarming. Any energy seems to be capable of being swallowed and converted. It even deliberately surges with black fog from totem to destroy, but fails. And Old Huang, he suddenly stands firm. Buxian? He widens his eyes looking at this guy, eyes full of disbelief. Su Buxian, even though he's subconsciously asking with doubt, actually seeing this guy. No, hearing that voice already confirms it's this bastard. He'd recognize him even if he turned to ash. However, the moment he stands, Old Huang feels dizzy, spurts blood fiercely, his body constantly twisting. Not good. Yellow Robe is about to backlash. In the next moment, the pain from the backlash has dissipated. That dangerous aura, almost berserk Yellow Robe, is also now worn by Su Qi. The mask plus the Yellow Robe. Su Qi's aura is astonishing. The Abyss God King even groans, unable to resist. The soul level already suppressed by the mask. Blue marks further limit the explosion of power. Added with the Yellow Robe. Boom! The Abyss God King doesn't hesitate. Suddenly its eyes become deeply terrifying. Killing intent surges. Boom! The whole venerable body directly explodes. Its intrinsic descending power also spreads violently. But for the God King, none of these matters. It only hopes its consciousness attached to this power representing the soul doesn't get damaged. Tisk! Running already? Su Qi clicks his tongue lightly, feeling it's a pity. After all, the energy of the God King compared to what was absorbed before is entirely not the same level, but there's no choice. Having used 2 divine artifacts, and the power of the blue mark together with the purple character card, only managed to suppress it, unable to keep it. It shows how powerful the God King truly is. The opponent now escapes, the consciousness can directly return to the main body. Thus this won't end. After regrouping will again descend from the sea of old days. If the divine king of the god's palace were to be completely imprisoned, the descended will would also be obliterated, and it could be called a fallen. At least during this period, the main bodies will cannot descend again from the sea of old days, and the main body will also suffer backlash. The restrictions of the sea of old days remain extremely strong, and even the divine king, or even the god, cannot avoid this point. However, looks like I arrived just in time. Su Qi watched as the black fog domain gradually dissipated, Old Huang panting heavily, while in the distance, the divine king of the gods' palace lay on the ground, weakly opening his eyes. Su Buxian, Old Huang, pale-faced, was healing his wounds while cursing. What on earth is going on? He had many questions, including but not limited to why the god of anxiety's mask appeared on his face, and why this guy could suppress the divine king's strength. Wait! Old Huang suddenly heard a violent rumbling sound. At this moment, the domains of both sides were dissipating from the dome, both of them floating mid-air. Why are the energy fluctuations around so terrifying? Old Huang raised his head, blocking his eyes with his hand from the blinding black and white brilliance, which roared like countless small suns burning. Because, Su Qi paused, this world is now in the core region. Old Huang's body trembled. The domain had already completely dissipated. He turned his gaze to the outside of this small world. Deep space was torn by darkness. Countless terrifying visions emerged from the deep space, as if numerous cracks were being ripped open. Twisted shadows wandered in the void, and various small worlds around carried auras of destruction and terrifying strength. Huge battle fluctuations erupted here. Innumerable lives were fiercely fighting in each small world. Old Huang's face turned green. Being enveloped in the domain and battling the Abyss God King, he hadn't noticed the movement of the small worlds dispersing. Unexpectedly, they reached the core region directly. However, fortunately, they were still some distance from the central battlefield. Because small worlds are just space fragments, when they collide, they will merge together, and the central world is the true main battlefield, where numerous small worlds all converge, the largest-scale godly powers explode. At least, we won't attract attention here, Old Huang murmured. This small world, when the two divine kings fought, had already cracked, and the origin would also separate due to the small world's collapse. After all, the only thing that attracts the convergence of origin is traces. The more traces there are, the more origin there will be. Everything in each small world carries traces, and it was based on this point that Old Huang chose a place with the least traces on the edge. If not for unexpected developments later, he could have continued to linger. And now, even if there was still a Divine King's projection, it wasn't a big problem. After all, the Divine King's projection had already consumed 90%. Moreover, it was the core region here, and those traces couldn't even be ranked. Wait! Old Huang suddenly raised his head. His face trembled, reaching out his hand to block the dazzling light. What's going on? Why is there such a massive origin above this small world? Above this small world, the brilliant origin was like a burning star, shining with dazzling radiance. Damn it! It wasn't like this before I went into domain battle. Even if there was a Divine King battle, it just attracted some free-floating origin from deep space, from afar looking just like a slightly brighter light bulb. And now, it's completely a burning, surging volcano. And most crucially, it continued to converge, continue to expand. As the origin kept gathering, it continuously changed, like a nurturing sphere, exuding a suffocating aura, not rapidly expanding, but slowing down after reaching a certain size, while light and darkness kept increasing, constantly twisting. It was a shock not only visually, but also a profound attraction, as if countless rays were being guided, rushing towards this small world. The surrounding space seemed to twist for it, with low rumbling sounds vaguely echoing the call of the origin. What a terrifying gravitational pull! And at this time, the one speaking next to the stunned Old Huang and Su Buxian was the just weakened Divine King. He looked up at that origin. The traces of this small world are extremely terrifying, therefore creating such an astonishing gravitational pull, collapsing everything as if becoming another center. The Divine King's sharp eyes instantly spotted the key point. Well, Old Huang murmured, is it because of the earlier battle? Or is it your Divine King's strength? No, it has nothing to do with us. The descending strength was merely a simple projection with single traces. Then why? Old Huang couldn't help but ask again. At this moment, the nearby small worlds seemed attracted by this force, rushing to gather toward the origin above. Even though the origin of this current world wasn't yet considered brilliant, it was like streams flowing to the abyss. Why? The Divine King slowly looked toward Su Buxian. You should ask the person next to you. He could see the enormous, unmeasurable gravitational pull concealed within this small world, with enormous traces landing in this world, causing this originally unremarkable small world to form a massive gravitational vortex. And all this happened after this person appeared. Old Huang looked at Su Buxian with some suspicion. He didn't understand. Wasn't it traces that attracted origin? This world doesn't have that many traces. It was truly like the God King's true body descending, perhaps even more. And Su Buxian, even carrying a divine artifact, couldn't possibly possess that many traces. Old Huang was about to speak, but at this moment, he heard vague sounds of battle cries, feeling energy fluctuations many times denser than before. He looked down and saw the vast Three Palaces group and numerous adventurers rushing out from the jurisdiction, fighting with the Abyss Monster Tide and believers. The Light Society was also among them, but in contrast, they were the smallest group. Old Huang could no longer speak. It seemed these palaces were the reason Su Qi came here. But that didn't matter. At this moment, boom! The entire small world was shaking. After all, it was the core region, and various incredible battle aftershocks couldn't be ignored like on the edge. Moreover, due to the terrifying gravitational force attracting other small worlds closer, it was foreseeable this would become a battlefield. Even a second center, given this attraction, was utterly boundless. Within the main battlefield, tens of thousands of small worlds converged. Many gods were fighting, countless lives also sought sanctuary and fought fiercely. And the origin, there was the most brilliant big sun, flickering with astonishing aura, constantly evolving, spinning. Kill! The various divine kings were also in this battlefield, their terrifying strength clashing against each other. In this progressively trembling battlefield, heaven and earth seemed torn apart, light and darkness intertwined. The divine king's strength surged like torrents, impacting everything around, tearing everything. Boom! A loud blast, the sky ripped, the divine king's power collided, seemingly triggering spatial tremors, huge energy waves crashing against each other, warping everything. The enormous energy fluctuations surged like tidal waves, rushing into every corner. No one beneath divine kings dared approach their battle zone. Su Qi watched this scene, softly said, "Keep it up. Don't break the chain midway." The ceremony arranged by the Hustler Palace was already quietly, yet rapidly expanding its range, absorbing all the surrounding energy crazily, compared to when it almost didn't move before. At this moment, the traces within the dimension were constantly flickering, gradually recovering from black and white charge. In this land shrouded in gloom, towering temples stand majestically as if giants under the firmament, casting vast shadows, silently witnessing a fierce slaughter in the human world. These temples are not only symbols of faith but also sanctuaries for countless lives. The strength they bestow is like an indestructible armor, protecting those battling in bloody conflicts. The cries of battle and the clashing of weapons intertwine in the air, accompanied by the ancient echoes of the temples, becoming even more heart-stirring. Old Huang looked at the dazzling main battleground in the distance, as if he could hear the roars from within. He weakly said in fear, "Our small world here won't turn out like that, right?" The Divine King shook his head. "No, it won't. Even if many small worlds merge over, the center where the God's Palace and Abyss lie is the real main battleground." That's a relief then. Old Huang could only comfort himself in this way. It's the broken window effect. Although things are very bad now, seeing the even worse situation of the main battleground suddenly makes it seem acceptable, putting his mind at ease. But Su Qi lifted his head, looking over there, his expression carrying a touch of mystery. That is indeed the most central main battleground. However, it is definitely not the only one, nor the one that decides fate. Boom! The origin gravity of this world is quite astonishing, constantly gathering scattered origins, while also bringing benefits to Su Chi. The energy burst from the main battleground and the surrounding small worlds is also gathered, making it more convenient for the ceremony at Hustler Palace to continue absorbing. Everything continues, and currently, the abyss power in this small world still exists. In this world covered by dark clouds, 3 grand palaces stand unyielding amidst the undercurrent, like lighthouses resisting the storm. Adventurers pour out from their jurisdictions like a torrent, weapons glinting with cold light in their hands, charging at the rampaging abyss monsters. On the battlefield, the shouts reaching heaven and the clangs of weapons intertwine, accompanied by the low growls of monsters. Those extraordinary beings of the abyss emerge like a tide, emanating an eerie glow. To be honest, without the Light Society holding up here, it's truly hard to say, as adventurers cannot deal with the extraordinary. And the ancient powers. Jiang Ji has already depleted the power of his character card. Bei Xinxing and Yang Jian are both in a cooling period, and the Pigeon God can at most play a supporting role. The Abyss followers roar. The power in the totem is unleashed. However, facing the number of adventurers at the 3 palaces and the surging power of the Light Society, these Abyss monster tides and the followers' power are like paper boats in a gale, retreating step by step. The smoke of battle permeates the air, blood splatters, and corpses are scattered everywhere. Each clash of weapons is as loud as thunder. Abyss monsters howl in fury, trying to retaliate with their primitive and violent strength. But adventurers keep pouring in like tides, unstoppable. This is an opportunity. Can you see the origin above us? It's completely different from the battleground below. The adventurers are filled with fighting spirit, their hearts surging. The origin on the battleground below is like a spark occasionally lit at night, while the origin in this small world is already blazing like daylight. We could actually get up here. We must survive no matter what. Accumulate more points. Attack. Points can allow them, upon the fall of origin in this world, to capture and merge with it. This is a visible opportunity. And just at this moment, the other small worlds in the land of extreme evil, under the strong origin gravity, ripple with spatial distortions, drawing closer like ships being towed. Most of them exude a dense black fog, as many small worlds have been conquered by abyss power. Rivers of blood flow, and cries of despair echo in the sky, with abyss power suppressing everything. Moreover, the tides of monsters from the abyss continually press closer to the small world where Su Chi is located. Oh no, oh no! Old Huang cursed. It seems like things haven't improved much at all. Not to mention the main battleground. 7/10 of the surrounding small worlds are completely under the abyss control. Nancy stood nearby. To be honest, after seeing Jiang Ji and the others, she already understood the situation. Although she was extremely shocked at that time, the battlefield situation was not good. Without thinking too much, she immediately rejoined the battle. Nancy wiped the black fog blood from her weapon with a rag. These forces won't stop. Now that they're free, they're coming at us here. At this moment, Su Chi stood inside the Hustler Palace, not with the others, as he looked around calmly. Even though it was inside the palace, the surroundings were a holographic miniaturized view of the small world where the palace was located, able to see everything. Beside him was a small presence, the Pigeon God, which looked around. Looks like the battle is coming. Su Chi said softly, "Isn't this good? Warm up before the big ones arrive." What do you mean by before the big ones arrive? Isn't this big enough already? Are you and I talking about the same thing? I was in the middle of battling. Why did you suddenly call me over? The Pigeon God sighed, looking at Su Chi. Now is the time when the sea of old days rolls most fiercely, also indicating that the limitations inside are weakening, allowing it to express quite a powerful strength even without a vessel. I am also fighting, so I need a protector, Su Chi said softly. The Pigeon God was taken aback. What battle? Su Chi smiled faintly and did not answer. He merely said softly, There might be various anomalies. I'm asking you to help cover them up, and I don't know how long it will last. The pigeon god was stunned, just about to speak. However, there is a latest settlement time. Su Qi looked towards the sky dome. That is, when everything descends. The pigeon god's brow furrowed. He didn't ask further questions, for he already knew that the opponent Su Qi was facing was the god of anxiety. Therefore, he would do his utmost to assist, even if it only slightly increased the odds for the god's palace. At this moment, Su Qi was already seated, commencing the last battle he had prepared for a long time, to control the strength of spiritual eyes. The evil god's power, during the riot of the spiritual eyes, had given Su Qi 5 chances to defeat the terrifying presence. All 4 previous attempts ended in failure. Although there was remarkable progress each time, for the last one, Su Qi naturally needed ample preparation. When the evil god's power riot was suppressed, Su Qi had already been making preparations. Though the time now was pressing, with battles and events occurring frequently, everything was already deployed well. At least before the arrival of the gods, it shouldn't be a big problem. He gradually released his consciousness, beginning to unleash the countless ritual bindings on the spiritual eyes, and at this moment, the pigeon god involuntarily shivered, widening his eyes. He only felt a kind of inexplicable fear arise in his heart, completely different from the anxious aura. Su Buxian, who the hell are you fighting against? At this moment, Su Qi's consciousness had returned to the spiritual eye world. In the depths of the spiritual eye world, a heavy, terrifying atmosphere permeated, the surroundings shrouded in a layer of black mist, twisted and unviewable pollution like ever-surging waves devouring all light and reason. This was a place not belonging to any known reality, where space became blurred and chaotic, and time seemed to lose its meaning. An asphyxiating aura continually flowed in the air, filled with despair and pain. Countless twisted shapes swam in the darkness, like repressed souls in struggle. Wailing voices echoed, mixed with fragmented whispers, nerve-wracking as if they might be swallowed at any moment. The air here seemed to be getting denser. Su Qi could sense the surrounding unease, feeling that each step was opposing those lurking shadows. Most importantly, a bloody red pupil, like a moon in the celestial sky above, seemed to be gazing here. Don't say it. Really don't say it? Su Qi looked at the vast eye overhead. It's even more lively than before. If he defeated it this time, only then could he truly, officially obtain this immense power. However, it wouldn't be so easy. In this dark space, a black shadow silently appeared, its outline blurred, fashioned seemingly from the darkness of the abyss, exuding a chilling aura. It had no limbs, its body made of a large amount of black mist moving through the air, its aura advancing towards Su Qi like a tide. A fear beyond words, as if witnessing the embodiment of humanity's deepest malice and despair. And when it gradually revealed itself, Su Qi could clearly see its true face. A sheep-headed monster, eyes like bloody red pupils, just like a moon in the night sky, as if watching this place, expressing an unfeeling hunger, those pupils reflecting scenes of tearing and death, the inescapable fear emanating from its gaze, as countless souls of the tormented seemed to convey their final despair towards it. Indeed, there are still changes. Su Qi calmly watched this scene. His strength was increasing, but the rioting power within the spiritual eyes also kept surging out. Though he managed to suppress it with spiritual energy triggered by multiple sequences, it wasn't enough, because the spiritual eyes would also trigger deeper power. There were subtle changes each time he entered, and this last time it was distinctly different. This monster could no longer be called the bloodlust it once was. It was more like a synthesis of evil god's power, the purest terror amalgamation of the abyss, devoid of any emotion or words, only endless slaughter and destruction, its existence seeming to add more tragedy to this already twisted world, cruel and cold. I'll call you the evil god's little trump. Su Qi grinned faintly, a serene expression on his face, unpressured by this terrifying presence. At the next moment, the horrible complex moved. I wasn't finished yet, Su Qi murmured to himself, his voice standing out as particularly clear in this silent world. His figure swaying slightly in the dark like a lone boat in a storm, without hesitation. Su Chi gripped the dark star in his hand, its faint glow blocking the terrifying twisted shadow instantly. The sheep head of this terrifying complex inclined slightly forward, emitting a dull, disturbing sound, as jarring as cracked rocks, its aura rippling as if to tear the surrounding air apart. Then, the black shadow suddenly lunged at Su Chi, attacked like a rushing tide with endless terror and violence. The air twisted instantly by the pressure. Piercing, ripping sounds reverberated in every corner of the spiritual eye world. You're using a spiritual attack in a spiritual space? At this point, Su Chi was no longer passively defensive. His figure twisting to evade the terrifying complex's blow, the dark star in his hand transforming into a long sword glistening with a cold sheen under the light. Directly deploying the sword god's smile, the sword's blade cut a massive arc in the darkness, seemingly to tear apart this endless despair. The air cut by the blade emitted a deafening sound. In the final battle for spiritual eyes, he naturally went all out, unleashing every major move used before against the opponent. The terrifying complex charged again. The dark star in his hand transformed into a giant bow, the arrow flickering with a shivering red glow, aimed directly at the twisted figure. The arrow's light slicing through the darkness, clashing with the terrifying complex instantly, producing a loud bang, as if the entire spiritual eye world trembled from this strike. Yet it merely forced the terrifying complex a step back, without halting it, its hand rising. The entire sheep head soared 1,000 meters high. Black mist spread furiously. A massive, apocalyptic black claw appeared. Su Chi felt a strong sense of oppression, as if the whole darkness of the spiritual eye world was slanting towards him. The pollution aura around growing more intense. Various terrifying phenomena emerged. However, Su Chi did not choose to retreat, instead pouring strength into the magic cube domain. Countless Rubik's cubes spun brilliantly, forming different lethal moves with various shapes and colors. Boom! Amazing killing intent streaked like lightning, drawing dazzling paths in the dark, directly aiming at the terrifying complex. Their powers converged in this moment, instantly triggering a violent shock wave, tearing a gap in the surrounding black fog, exposing the twisted black and white, only to be covered again in a blink of an eye. Boom, boom, boom. The combat between him and the terrifying complex grew increasingly fierce. The collision sounds echoed repeatedly, and the pollution aura around ravaged like a wild storm. Twisted forms ceaselessly moving between Su Chi and the terrifying complex, seemingly trying to engulf him. At the same time, in the outside world, in the depths of the sea of old days, there lay a silhouette blurred and unseeable, terrifying power buried deep in the abyss, numerous chains on its body gradually breaking inch by inch. Meanwhile, an eye slowly opened. Old Huang shivered. Could not help, completely couldn't help it. What's happening? I feel like I'm being watched by a pair of terrifying eyes. Old Huang could ask no one, because only he was a demigod here. The other godsons had entered a cooldown period, and the Divine King had long since flown to the main battlefield where the God's Palace and Abyss were located. And in the palace, the Pigeon God was already in a frenzy. It was unleashing all its strength to block all sorts of terrifying dark phenomena. The shadows of the abyss emerged in the air like a mirage, the blurry images gradually becoming clear, reflecting once terrifying scenes, making one's heart tighten. That was a world shrouded in endless darkness, the surrounding scenes becoming twisted and unreal, as if reality and nightmare intertwined. In these twisted images, worlds stained red with blood kept appearing. In some worlds, a huge crack appeared on the ground, as if it was the entrance to the abyss, and the dark liquid flowing from the crack constantly devoured the surrounding objects. Any creature approaching it was without exception. Within this darkness, the whispers of the Lord of Chaos echoed, seemingly summoning more life into this endless abyss, consumed by large amounts of blackness, turning into strange existences, as cries of agony echoed repeatedly. There were worlds infected by the abyss virus, where the infected creatures gradually became violent and twisted, their bodies swelling under horrific torment. As if about to decay and mutate, countless sharp limbs grew from their bodies, becoming twisted in appearance, glinting with bloodthirsty, frenzied light, tearing apart the screaming and fleeing life. There were also originally harmonious worlds shrouded in black fog, countless people gripped by invisible fear, driven to madness and self-harm, suicide, the air filled with the scent of despair. Even after death, people's souls drifted in the mist, like cursed ghosts, forever unable to escape the grip of the abyss. The strength of the abyss rampaged in every corner, tearing at people's souls without restraint. Now I understand why they wanted me, a god here to help him block the phenomena. Damn it. If not for knowing this guy, otherwise it would now think Su Buxian was an existence of the abyss. The terrifying phenomena were truly shocking. Not just one phenomenon, as if a chain reaction, different abyss phenomena kept appearing, like a nightmare replaying endlessly. The phenomena of the abyss, whether past massacres or current terrifying pollution, intertwined in this mirage-like projection, revealing dreadful scenes. Damn it! I didn't expect that the strength I painstakingly recovered had to be used in this place. Damn it! Exploded! Although I don't know why such terrifying phenomena occurred, they absolutely cannot be allowed to escape, because what it sees is pure terror, a fusion of many other strengths. With the surging, primordial aura of the abyss, once allowed to escape, it will trigger the Sea of Old Days, directly summoning those terrifying existences. This kind of thing must not happen. After all, at this very moment on the main battlefield, it had already entered a true white-hot phase. Strength continuously descended from the Sea of Old Days. Numerous gods fought fiercely. Numerous forces participated, throwing in everything. A large amount of origin continuously gathered, eventually about to erupt like a singularity cosmic explosion. And while the pigeon god busied itself, the Sea of Old Days also started to churn on the true highest ranks of the main battlefield. They also detected it. Did you feel it? Yes. The deepest strength is about to come out. I saw the signs. At most 20 minutes. Everyone, before the strength of the god descends, try to find the opponent's carrier and protect our heavenly destiny people. The battle of the divine kings erupted loudly. Different from the previous carrier list, whether heavenly destiny people or venerable, finding a carrier capable of bearing a being of the divine king's level was extremely difficult. Not to mention, the terrifying god, to bear its strength without collapsing. Such a person almost doesn't exist. So now the god's palace is adopting the second plan. That is to let the god's sons substitute. Their bloodline can barely bear it. But each person could only last 10 minutes at most, then they have to switch. Now the god's sons also participated in the battle, with the strength of gods descended on them. It was the same on the side of the venerable. After all, they must adapt in advance, or else they would collapse directly. So at this moment, both sides are searching for the goddess carrier. The god's palace believes the abyss side is also using this plan. Additionally, there's another point with the revival of strength from the depths of the old days, besides the god. Those gate worlds are also opening one after another. Inside these gates are not any god, but the true underlying powers from the god's palace and the abyss buried deep below, from countless ancient life forms to demigods, gods, divine kings of all levels. All the previously fallen, scattered various strengths are still not all. At least nearly half haven't appeared yet. Perhaps it's an illusion. Su Qi can feel the bloody eye in the deep space becoming deeper, as if it was no longer an ornament like a blood moon, but gradually gaining some spirituality. However, currently there's no time to care about so much. The battle with the abyss horror body is still ongoing. Boom, boom, boom. In this boundless spiritual space, the exploding roar is like thunder, tearing through this eerie nihil. Su Qi squints slightly. Through the layers of twisted illusions, he can sense the presence of the abyss horror body, like a whisper from a nightmare, getting closer. At this moment, both sides are no longer in mere melee, During the battle, both forces are gradually liberating, without any flaws, starting the most direct power clash. But it's not spiritual energy, it's spiritual power. The Abyss horror body's spiritual power is like an endless torrent of darkness. Surging forth, around it, various twisted monsters emerge. A giant, unspeakable existence appears from the void, with a sinister face full of blood-red eyeballs, seemingly staring at Su Qi. Starting to compete with imagination? Su Qi curls his lips into a smile, raises his hand. The seemingly ordinary weapon instantly transforms into a giant mecha starship, shimmering with blue light all over, as if responding to his call. The mecha starship travels through this thick black fog space without hindrance, cutting through the twisted illusion realm. Su Qi controls the starship to start the counterattack. His gaze locks on the giant black fog monster, its form towering like a giant mountain, already rushing forward. And in the next moment, boom! The starship's turret instantly aims at the target, emitting a deafening cannon sound. A massive energy bomb roars forth, shooting directly at the black fog monster. With a huge bang, the black fog monster's body collides with the energy. A fiery explosion instantly devours part of its body. Painful howls echo through the void. This is a clash of spiritual power, the most substantial core force in the entire space. Whoever's spiritual power is completely defeated loses control entirely. Su Qi's body emits a muffled sound, showing signs of cracking, but steadies instantly. And the opponent is likewise, even more severe, with a massive black fog gushing out, evidently injured. Yet this doesn't stop the Abyss horror body. It's will becoming stronger in distortion. The black fog monster's body also begins self-repair, flesh recongealing, presenting an even more hideous form. Su Qi raises an eyebrow. It seems relying solely on this starship is far from enough. The Abyss horror body's spiritual power is constantly evolving. And in the next moment, his starship begins to evolve, shape-changing, gradually transforming into a white phantom, surrounded by flickering energy rings, like a mysterious wise man, superior to all. A touch of magic wouldn't hurt. Su Qi's voice echoes in the spiritual space. Though it takes over 10 seconds to prepare, but once successfully released, then there'll be only one result. Su Qi smiles slightly. Ultimate elimination. These words seem to make the Abyss horror complex slightly move. The black fog eyes stare fixedly at that wise man. The wise man has already started drawing the ritual with golden light from all directions. The vast brightness is obviously not simple. It doesn't want to see what kind of magic it is. Immediately starts moving, driving the terrifying monster once again, rushing towards Su Qi, faster than before. After all, since this guy is already exposed, who would give him time to prepare? And as the opponent enters the range, the next moment, whoosh! Wise man's abdomen opens like a machine instantly, in a lightning-fast manner. A massive gathering of energy erupts. Just hearing a boom, this abdomen releases a terrifying, dazzling beam, directly aiming at the black fog monster. The beam has immense power, plus there's no defense. In an instant, the black fog monster's core is destroyed. The Abyss complex's black fog-condensed eyes stare fixedly at Su Qi, seemingly saying, "This counts as shitty magic." And Su Qi smiles slightly. "If you don't study math, physics, chemistry, then this is magic." Boom! The horror complex seems to be angry, suddenly changing form, transforming into 4 massive twisted shadows, flooding towards all directions, trying to disperse Su Qi's attacks. Each shadow is like the incarnation of the 4 Abyss existences, exuding suffocating, terrifying aura. The Abyss horror body's power seems to have been pushed to the extreme, an irresistible, eerie force surging around it, countless images flashing before his eyes, various twisted monsters and demons frantically emerging, as if trying to drown him. Gang fighting is not a good habit. Su Qi is calm and unhurried. Fighting here, everything is fatal, dangerous. No such thing as crushing, only continual collisions, probing for opportunities. Just now, the wise man at this moment, transformed into energy fluctuations spreading, forming a powerful shield, blocking the black fog monster's shadow. Meanwhile, his mind continues to extend. Deep space power star shines forth, mobilizing endless star energy. Falling. Su Chi pushes forward with his palm. The star instantly releases scorching brilliance, turning into countless meteor showers, bombarding downward, meteor showers pouring down like rain, carrying a doomsday-like terrifying power. A large number of monsters are also instantly suppressed by the strong energy. Meanwhile, the star's brilliance explodes at the core of the black fog monster. Tearing through it, numerous black fog monsters transform to nihility amidst the roar, vanishing in this spiritual space. However, this is just the beginning. All clashes maximize the spiritual power. Release it, the characteristics of power will also manifest. Not simply addition or subtraction. At this moment, a large number of demons also simultaneously emerge. Discovered that close combat and long-range fights can't find any flaws, finally wanting to use the vast spiritual power of the abyss to play a war of attrition? Su Chi pauses slightly. However, what's really troublesome isn't those monsters, but Su Chi looks at the three abyss figures separating before him, now rapidly expanding due to the death of a large number of monsters. He slightly raises the corner of his lips. Sure enough, the powers of those abyss beings are interconnected. The four of them each seem to have contributed a part of their power, seemingly wanting to do something. Perhaps answers can be found in this spiritual space. But solving everything before him is most crucial. He is not panicking in his heart. Spiritual power again transforms into a gigantic battle blade. Emitting a sharp light, he grips the battle blade, body like a lightning, leaps towards the attack. Slash! With a light shout, the giant battle blade emerges, slashing towards those demons, each swing carrying unmatched power, cutting through the void, shredding the demon bodies, blood and limbs scattering, submerging in the bizarre space. The demons seem vulnerable, but more twisted creatures are summoned the next moment, forming terrifying monsters, swarming towards Su Chi. Boom, boom, boom. Continuous roaring sounds. The battle blade in Su Chi's hand dances like the wind, bringing up countless blade lights, flashing at cunning angles, tearing through everything blocking the monsters in front of him. Su Chi's target is also clear. These fights are meaningless, what matters is. Those figures, what are they trying to do? The spiritual space is illusory, but the evil god's eyes connect with the body, coupled with the fusion of the abyss four great gods' powers. Everything seems traceable. And at this point, boom, boom, boom. Su Chi's ear hears the terrifying loud noise. From the moon of blood-red eyes, terrifying giants climb upon it, then eerily sprout numerous tentacles, falling from the sky. The fierce tentacles have countless sharp blood-red teeth exposed, seemingly wanting to destroy everything. Only one tentacle almost tears everything apart. Su Chi watches this scene, his pupils also change. This thing looks like a tentacle, but isn't exactly that. But the important thing isn't this, rather the terrifying giant still on that blood moon. The aura within it feels familiar to Su Chi, as if it's an existence that once appeared in the ominous universe. As mentioned before, the spiritual space here is connected to the main body, and the Abyss Horror Complex will fight instinctively. All traces will change accordingly. Therefore, Su Chi looked at the enormous monster with an inexplicable premonition that this wasn't the last encounter in the spiritual space. Tick-tock, tick-tock. Even though Su Chi was still traversing the terrifying apocalyptic collision with his slashing sword like a shadow, he was preparing a big move. Because the countdown had begun. The countdown to the Sea of Old Days' final eruption. Tick-tock, tick-tock. The countdown to his desperate gamble to end it all. And at this moment, a change appeared behind Su Chi. I'm not afraid of you seeing this, since you revealed the trump card to use in the present world. Then, this is what I've prepared specially. The Abyss Horror Complex, shuddered all over, now fearfully staring at something behind Su Chi. And outside, the Sea of Old Days has begun to churn violently. Although countless people were still fighting fiercely, they grew increasingly anxious as the countdown drew closer. Waves surged, the sea rolled, huge waves like raging beasts tore the black and white old days. The black and white waves surged to the sky, even raising endless water spray, embroiled in infinite darkness and fear. Boom! A deafening roar. The entire space seemed to tremble at that moment. The bell ringer's heart involuntarily accelerated, as if feeling the oppressive power spreading around him. His gaze pierced through the layers of water curtain, frozen on the gradually emerging shadow. Deep within the old days. Deep within the old days, an enormous colossal object, like a veritable prison, heavy and eerie. Undoubtedly, the sight was vast, as it gathered countless small worlds into the huge land of extreme evil. Compared to the black and white prison, deep within the sky-domed sea of old days, it was like a stone settled within, with a whole continent suspended above. And now, it seemed to be the moment it's crashing down, with the churning of the sea of old days. Hiss! As if the roar of the black and white waves, it shook the eardrums, seemingly foretelling the impending horror. The bell ringer slightly frowned, feeling the shudder from deep within the sea of old days. Protect the godsons. Prepare to receive them. This battlefield is vast, as it is the fusion of 100,000 small worlds, even accommodating various gate worlds emerging from the deep prison. The ancient existences have no problem at all. Apart from those another batch of descending gods, divine kings, etc., the key point is those god masters. At this moment, the sea of old days churned. The deep prison emitted a terrifying cracking sound, seemingly indicating some indescribable power is about to awaken. That ghastly prison, silent for millions of years, lurking like a ghost in the crevices of time. And now, with the intensifying sound, the surrounding black and white waves seemed to feel a surge from the deep, beginning to churn uneasily, the black and white sea water woven into a shivering whirlpool in the waves. Cover your ears with sanctuary under the extraordinary. And at this moment, a divine king roared, the sound echoing across the battlefield. That sound was terrifyingly eerie, like the roar from the sea of old days trying to tear everything apart. It assaulted every life's mind, making one shiver with cold, painful groans, heart-rending howls intertwined, like countless souls struggling in despair, unable to escape the invisible shackles. Below, countless lives. Their eyes flicker with the light of fear and despair. Their bodies tremble involuntarily, even following the divine king's instruction to cover their ears, using all kinds of protective blessings. But the instinct deep in the soul makes them tremble consciously. This sound is not a simple noise, but the abyss' most terrifying echo. Even those who deem themselves extraordinary, the arrogant god's sons, also at this moment feel the irresistible panic, can't help but follow the divine king's command, cover their ears, trying to insulate themselves from this maddeningly terrifying sound. This is the tremor penetrating the soul. Whether ancient power exists or not, it cannot be resisted. This is the echo of the ominous universe, soul-level suppression. The ominous sound still surges like a black tide into every corner, eroding sanity, forcing life's nerves. The air is filled with a deathly aura, as if the entire world has become fragile and powerless at this moment, ready to be swallowed by this endless terror. And amid the continuous ominous echo, the cracking sound kept echoing. The deep prison's door finally torn apart, that heavy iron door as if smashed open by some invisible force, emitting a ripping sharp sound. Instantly, a strong oppressive force swept in. Countless people under the influence of this force felt an involuntary surge of fear within. Those forces once slumbering in the prison now breaking free from the ceiling. Vaguely, in the darkness deep in the prison, a thread of ominous light glimmers. Those forgotten existences gradually reveal their shapes. I feel my heart skipped a beat. Old Huang widened his eyes, stared hard at those figures, too blurry, too twisted, without knowing which one is the evil god. However, those twisted and irregular shapes, moving in darkness, like beasts shackled for ages, gradually sensing the breath of madness, countless life's hearts accelerating, seemingly able to feel the ferocity and longing of these terrifying beings. It's coming! At that moment, the aura of the abyss grew ever denser, the air suffused with a suffocating stench of decay, as if a forbidden land that hadn't breathed for millennia had reawakened. A thunderous roar erupted. Prison gates formed from ominous forces appeared directly above the sea of old days. The presences within the prisons were no longer mere vague shadows, but those entities forgotten by time. Few in history ever retained memories of them, their traces worn to the extreme. Everything they left in reality was cleansed by the ominous. They have come. The lost remnant army of the abyss. The inmates of the many prisons were black shadows, with only their eyes visible, eyes glistening with a ravenous hunger, as if seeking prey to devour and restore their traces. Boom! They were descending with a crashing wave, teeming like a tide. Meanwhile, other prisons of the Gate world opened up, unleashing myriad ancient entities whose traces had been erased to reappear in the present world. The strengths released from the prisons were not just singular entities. A vast army seemed to emerge behind them. Countless twisted, deformed figures surged like a tide from the abyss prisons of various shapes. Some were twisted existences, others eerie shadows. Despite appearing illogical, each emitted an evil aura unique to the abyss. Prepare to face them. The bellringer's voice echoed across the battlefield, and a tense atmosphere quickly spread. He remained the leader of the battlefield, though now leading under the gods. Sanctuary strength enhancement. All realized the gravity of the situation. Facing these unspeakable entities, no one could predict their abilities, or how those terrifying strengths lost in legend might manifest. With the emergence of numerous ancient black shadows, the battlefield's atmosphere became more tense. As those terrifying figures appeared on the battlefield, black vortexes formed wherever they passed, each vortex containing indescribable taboos, and they seemed unable to communicate with the life of this land. What on earth is happening? Deep within the old days, they have been erased to a point of forgotten limits. Now each existence is adapting, or devouring everything around to increase their traces. And the best method is to slaughter and plunder others. As soon as the words fell, "They are here," someone shouted in terror, their voice trembling with helplessness. Countless people looked towards the eerie direction to see those abysmal shadows surging like a tide, about to engulf the entire battlefield. One after another, blurred and twisted figures surged beneath the waves, as if their existence had merged with the abyss. In this horrifying scene, the next moment, another group of white shadows from the Gate world appeared. These were different from the black shadows with their characteristics of fury, devouring, and destruction, exuding a more gentle ancient aura, as if everything natural in the universe left traces upon them. This is the true nature of the old days, black and white. Old Huang watched the surging black and white shadows, feeling a stir of emotion in his heart, his expression flickering with mysterious shadows, very complex. It has begun. In this turbulent wave, terrifying black shadows and white armies charged continuously, the ominous aura growing more intense. These ancient entities couldn't yet act, but when their traces restored, they would rush onto this expansive battlefield. And at that moment, a sudden boom resounded, like the earth and sky shaking, followed by an endless darkness surging forth, enveloping everything. The abyss prepared ritual shots skyward, and in an instant, everything transformed into a sea of blood, with their ritual preparations long underway, slaughtering countless lives and polluting, breaking apart numerous worlds. It was all for this moment. Boom! Massive blackness surged in like a tide, the bodies and strengths of countless black shadows rapidly recovering, suppressing the ominous aura. Yet, in this moment of despair, boom! A vast white light exploded from the sea of old days, penetrating through everything. The white shadows were also restoring bodies and strengths, releasing their aura. Is that the master of the present world's strength? Countless people in the god's palace stared in shock at the scene, only to lower their eyes in disappointment in the next moment. Within the sea of old days there was no majestic figure. The master of the present world can no longer appear. Didn't we already know this during the final battle? A divine king said with a deep voice. Now it's the leftover strength. The great existence set everything in motion with his sacrifice. To battle, countless gods stepped forth with resolve, ready to meet the oncoming tide, whether the bizarre army of the abyss or those unspeakable strengths, already causing a vast slaughter. Welcome the true end. The voice of the abyss god king reverberated like war drums across the battlefield. Countless lights shone brightly on the main battlefield, yet a heavy weight still pressed on everyone's hearts, because the terrifying source still loomed over everyone. Above were 6 grand figures of the master of the old days, bound by countless chains. Although the prisons opened, these 6 figures had yet to descend. Apart from demigods and above, none dared to look directly at these 6 figures, but everyone knew their identity. 2 god rulers from the god's palace, 4 god rulers from the abyss, still not free from the chains like the star river across them, yet with a breath already capable of world-shattering strength. As the divine kings raised their heads, their eyes focused solemnly on the 6 figures beyond. In the overlapping chains connecting to the ominous, even they felt an icy shiver of forbidden danger. At that moment, in the corner of the main battlefield, a figure slowly emerged unnoticed among those present. He watched it all calmly, adjusting his black and white tie. In the past, I tried countless times to lead the trajectory of fate, like a butterfly beating its wings, hoping to trigger a storm in the deep space. Now seems to be the moment of revelation. At this very moment, the air was drenched with an indescribable tension, as if even time had compressed into something suffocatingly heavy. The surrounding world under this dreadful wave seemed even smaller. The wind's sound turned silent. Every heartbeat seemed amplified, echoing across this battlefield on the brink of collapse. Meanwhile, the 6 figures in the darkness began to stir, as if silently watching the restless souls below. Their presence like whispers from the old days, carrying an irresistible allure and oppression, causing everyone present to shudder. Each moment of waiting felt excruciatingly long, an eternal torment, as if telling of impending disaster. Boom! In that instant, countless origins erupted. Dazzling lights lit up the oppressive darkness. Then, a terrifying oppressive force swept over, like a whisper before awakening. Countless beings above demigod status trembled, watching the 6 figures gradually clarify. The world itself seemed to react, strengths in space violently surging, with a hint of impending doomsday. It's here. This voice echoed involuntarily in everyone's heart, fear and anticipation intertwining into an uncontrollable wave, raising an unprecedented storm. And in the next instant, an eye slowly appeared, revealing that this presence had been awake all along, never closing its eye, coldly observing everything below. Countless beings trembled and shouted, fortifying themselves with all available sanctuary. This single gaze was enough to mentally break most beings.